player of all time. It's you. And here's the theory: when you talk about Cristiano Ronaldo and you talk about Lionel Messi, are you an extrovert like Cristiano Ronaldo, or are you an introvert like Lionel Messi? And depending upon your choice, probably gives you a good identification for who you are as a human being in real life. Because the extroverts will gravitate towards Cristiano Ronaldo, the introverts over to Lionel Messi. But these two players were the first two players to kind of take over that conversation, which was, who do you like better, Pele or Maradona? Pele was more the introvert. Maradona was more of the extrovert. And so as you kind of like paint this picture of a young Argentine who grew up in Rosario, Argentina, who went over to Barcelona to play at La Masia for Barcelona as a 12-year-old, who had to take growth hormones because he was so small, to then be, if not the most impactful player in the history of the game, at least in the rarefied air of the top 5 of most impactful players, to see what he has done throughout the course of his career, to see the health, to see the drive, the motivation, never about the money, to see the impact of every single time he steps on the field, whether for club or country. We always did this thing where he could never be better than Diego Maradona because he didn't win a World Cup. Boxes checked. So to now, after the past 2.5, 3 seasons, to confirm that on April 22nd, 2026, that Inter Miami and Lionel Messi will be here at America First Field, taking on Diego Luna and Real Salt Lake. It's something that we've all been hoping for. It's something that we were all frustrated with not happening soon enough. But now we know it's absolutely happening on April 22nd of next year.
So I'm going to make a little bit of a loose comparison,
Yeah.
but I want you to help us understand, I'll use the term ROI, return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember, and Grant Wall wrote the book on David Beckham, the Beckham Experiment, when Beckham came over.
Yeah.
And certainly a lot of these guys, and Messi is included in this, come over later in their career, and how much of this is business related.
Yeah.
Obviously, for David Beckham, it turned into an excellent return on investment for him.
The owner, by the way, the man who utilized his contract with the LA Galaxy
Yeah.
to launch Inter Miami.
Right. And obviously a very savvy, smart guy, not just a great soccer player. When it comes to the return on investment that Major League Soccer has seen after the investment that they made in Lionel Messi and bringing him over here, do you think it's paid the dividends the league was hoping for?
Oh, I think pennies on the dollar, to be quite honest with you. I think you could say the same for Thomas Muller up in Vancouver, and certainly say the same for the $25 to $26 million sent to your Tottenham Hotspur in exchange for Sung Hyung-min.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with Tio Max Bredos, weekly for Apple TV, and we do the LAFC podcast once a week. And instantaneously, overnight, the numbers were skyrocketing. And we went from English and Spanish live on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook for LAFC, for the LAFC broadcast, to all of a sudden being dominated by English and Spanish questions, to having to get an interpreter for Korean because all of our questions were coming in real time. And it was 4 a.m, Spence.
That's wild.
4 a.m.
Yeah.
So an iconic superstar in Sung Hyung-min that transcends not only Korean culture but Asian culture, as well as the pop culture, as well as soccer culture. But to your point about David Beckham, I don't think he'll ever truly get the amount of respect that he deserves for the decision to leave Real Madrid at that stage of his career and come to the LA Galaxy, because the seismic shift in the direction, and you witnessed it with your dad and everything that was being built with the influence of Real Madrid. I always say bringing Real Madrid to Salt Lake City at that time in 2006 was like taking the New York Yankees to Timbuktu. I mean, that's the only analogy that I could possibly put together, because it was just unheard of in those moments. But to see the transition, to see the movement, and then now to see Lionel Messi, the global superstar, I guess to answer your original question, if you could wrap up Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Tom Brady, LeBron James, and put them in that world soccer atmosphere, that's when I think you're starting to approach what his effect is around the world globally, not just for soccer, but for general awareness.
Well, and to back up your point before people roll their eyes, Sportico has a list of just the most popular sports by number of fans, okay? Number 10 is American football with 400 million fans. That's number 10. Number one is soccer, with an estimated 3.5 billion people around the world that have soccer as their preferred sport at the start. Now, we are, media personalities in the United States of America talking about a sport that domestically is probably fourth or fifth, if we're honest. And I've never been one to believe that soccer will permeate throughout the course of, the tapestry of our sporting culture to the point where it will compete with basketball or football or baseball domestically. But I always try to talk about this through the prism of what it means globally, what it means worldwide. And, Messi coming here the April before the start of the World Cup is just a really interesting way to kind of pave the path for sports fans here to experience what the World Cup is, which I never have, by the way, Donnie.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the scale and scope of the World Cup being hosted in our region, how impactful do you think that will be?
Yeah, I think you would probably try to leverage a conversation about the Olympics and what that would look like, and specific to here, the Winter Olympics, and what it meant. But I would probably attach a nuclear time bomb to everything that is the World Cup, because the expanded World Cup format is now going to bring even more interest and eyeballs when countries like Uzbekistan, Curacao, Haiti, an incredible story where they can't even play a single international competition in Haiti because of obviously the political and global landscape of what's happening down there. But then to think about, and again, this is coming from a guy who watched the power of the FIFA Club World Cup for the very first time.
Yeah, you were involved in the broadcast,
and to be the lead broadcaster there and to see it in New York at MetLife Stadium and be sold out in 3 of those games. It was extraordinary. Again, at the time I was a 16-year-old kid in Southern California whose parents didn't have enough money to, finagle their way into tickets at the Rose Bowl. So I was donating my time at the LA Convention Center. I was seeing the power of the World Cup there. And then when the United States wasn't playing, because I was consuming everything on television that I could, I was parking my car at the top of Pasadena and going into the gully and being around the Rose Bowl to just feel the passion, the culture, the camaraderie of everything that was. And then to be able to play with my heroes, to be able to, do a show daily on SiriusXM with Tony Miola, to be alongside Alexi Lawless as my first professional teammate, the New England Revolution, to be lifelong friends with Tab Ramos and John Harkes and Eric Winalda and these type of guys, to hear their stories and the power for Alexi to score a goal and then go to Padova and Serie A and be able to play against AC Milan and Inter Milan. To grow up in real time to see this, now to watch my boys who are 16, going to be 14 and going to be 8, to have their opportunity to see in real time what this means, it's nothing short of extraordinary. And I'm really, really excited for, and this is why I think it's important right now for Diego Luna and the tie into Real Salt Lake, the U.S. men's national team, and right now the feel-good factor after these last 6 matches with Mauricio Pochettino, the head coach, who, by the way, comes over from Tottenham Hotspur, PSG, and then over from Chelsea. To see the momentum, I was nervous about the apathy of what was happening around the U.S. men's national team after what happened at Nations League and heading into the Gold Cup. That's not the case. I'm incredibly excited for the momentum that's happening. They're going to play Portugal, waiting for the announcement for that second game in Atlanta. We heard whispers about Germany being the send-off game. There's still another opportunity on the East Coast for a game before that. You got 4 games left. You got 205-ish days before the start of the World Cup. And, man, I cannot wait to see the power and the general overall, I think, what's the right way to explain this? The general excitement that the world is going to see happen here in the United States, because a lot of the naysayers that say, not really interested, soccer's not really my thing, I think they're going to get behind this U.S. team.
Was the World Cup where Kyle and Nikki, was that 2010?
That was Brazil. No, that was 2014.
2014.
Down in Brazil, yeah.
My World Cup wake up moment was 2006, because I had never even watched a moment of a World Cup.
Yeah.
And then, we bring the club here 04, first year 05, and I'm like, all right, well, let's see what this is all about. It's so gripping. Like, soccer has this element to it that is theater in a way that other sports just don't. And goals feel like miracles, and seminal moments feel impactful in a way that if you're watching a basketball game, it scores a basket. Okay, go get a stop and score another one, right? There's something about the World Cup, and I can't necessarily pinpoint it, but it was really kind of put on steroids for me watching our players play when it came to Kyle specifically, because Nicky made the roster, but he was was it Tim Howard's bat? I don't remember who the starter was.
It was Tim Howard and Brad Guzan.
That's right. So Nicky was kind of the third keeper, but watching Kyle, and then Robbie Finley actually was able to get some run as well.
Yeah.
Diego Luna, his potential to be playing on this team, you did a good job of outlining just how crowded that group is. But if I had to hold you to it, do you think he makes the roster? Do you think he actually – okay, good.
Yeah, I do. Without hesitation. This young man, it's the path less traveled. And I think when you look at, growing up in Northern California and getting the opportunity to get to know him and have these conversations, I had a great piece with him that lives over on Bleacher Report a couple of weeks ago, where we did Crossbar Challenge and we sat down and we were talking about, Hispanic Heritage Month and the tug and the pull of growing up in a Mexican American household, and his parents and his family identifying with the Mexican national team, whereas he only saw him wearing the crest of the U.S. men's national team jersey. Even when moments where things weren't going great, and he was the standout and the star of the U.S. under-20 team, where Xavier Gosso just played a couple of weeks ago, versus being left off unceremoniously out of the Olympics for God knows why, to now have this run. Spence, he played in 15 matches this year for Mauricio Pochettino. He played, I think he had 10 starts in those 15 matches.
And isn't that the longest streak?
And so it's the most that anybody had played underneath Mauricio Pochettino consecutively.
Okay.
Then on top of that, you've got the iconic moments where he breaks his nose, comes back on the field, and Mauricio Pochettino, I asked him afterwards, how do you explain this guy? And he goes, big balls. And he says that on air, and you're like, oh, my God, he's fully invested in this kid. And then just to see the power where overnight, and again, he could have blue hair, he could have pink hair, he could have yellow highlights, the tattoos, the look, the feel, the and I say this with all due respect, the I'm going to eat you type of mentality, the arrogance, the cockiness, because he's just pinging the ball and moving all over the place. He's got, and I'm rubbing my fingers together, he's got something that I think, and maybe it's a machismo, maybe it's something that's like a flair that really identifies with the Argentinian kind of background, the Spanish background of this coaching staff. And I think that's what's going to put him over the top, the intangibles of you can start him from the opening whistle, you can bring him in off the bench as an impact player. And I've been amazed to follow this team over the last 12 months and watch in real time intrigue versus, oh my God, Luna's on the field. And the moment, Spence, he came, it was actually Denver, Colorado against Australia. Christian Pulisic goes down 20 minutes in. You would think there'd be like a deflating moment in the stadium. Luna comes on the field, standing up, applauding, roaring, excitement. And this is at the Mortal Enemy, home of the Colorado Rapids, Rocky Mountain Cup.
Yep.
So just to see what he's capable of doing, I'm extremely excited, and I can't wait for him to shine on the big stage, because there's also the duality of of a complexity of a conversation of, yes, World Cup, yes, international superstar, yes, hero, generational hero. But this kid also is putting himself in the window where all of a sudden the benefits of whatever the future looks like for him is based on his performance and wherever he ends up going next, versus also Real Salt Lake saying, hey, by the way, this kid, we didn't necessarily bring him from the ground up, but we bet on him when he was a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
We bet on him because we saw the potential. And now we have proof and concept that if you want to potentially follow the same path, like now we're seeing Xavier Gosso in the same lane, look at what we've done as a club. We are builders. We will give opportunities to those that maybe other people's didn't really bet on, and we've got a pathway that can give you an unbelievable amount of success.
Before I say you lose, and I'm going to throw my jacket on. I'm going to have you sit here. We got to get a picture to recreate the 2000 before you take off. Back to kind of the draw and the gravitas and intensity of a World Cup setting. I just remember this. The other wake-up moment I had, and I don't remember which match I was watching in 2006, but one of the cool snapshots is prior to the match, they play both national anthems, and they show the rosters. And I don't remember what country it was, but the players were screaming their national anthem, and tears were running down there. I have chills right now because I was like, dude, what is this? You don't see that type of passion, I don't think, with our guys domestically. What is it about the World Cup that inspires that emotion?
Well, it's socioeconomics. There's a lot of things that come into play. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with, coaches from different countries and asking him what's the difference when you compare and contrast against the United States. And it was actually here and trying to qualify for the Olympics back in, can't remember, it was Andy Herzog's year. It was when Luis Gill was playing. And
Luis Gill.
and one of the conversations, the United States ended up having to play a 2-game series against Colombia. And one of the conversations was, what's the difference? And the difference was, as we're smiling.
There we go. Thanks, Joe.
What the difference? The coach after the game, he was the Honduran coach for both the Olympic team and for the full national team, and he said it's something that will never change the way I kind of view this conversation. He said the kids in the U.S. will get an iPhone, they'll get an iPad, they'll get a Nintendo Switch, and that'll be their Christmas present. He's like, my boys get a ball. And he's like, what you're failing to recognize, and this was a part of a bigger conversation, I've had plenty of them since, is that these kids, with their opportunity, it's not just representing their country, if they're lucky enough to get to that level. It's the fact that they're representing their families. They're representing the work of their parents. They're representing their neighborhood, everything that comes across this. They are these iconic players that are being exalted, and just thinking about the moment that they step on the field, I've witnessed this. I've played against this. It's not our game. It's their game. That's kind of the mentality.
Yeah.
It's like, who do you in your $300 boots and your silky white U.S. Nike men's national team jersey? Oh, come on down. Let's show you a field down in El Salvador where the grass is over your ankles. There's dudes with AK-47s walking the track, and we're kicking off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because we want you to suffer. And all of a sudden, that is a huge wake-up call.
Yeah.
So in all of these moments, when you're talking about pride of national team, these are all like the data points for me to think about when I'm watching these teams and I'm watching these players belt out their national anthem and I'm seeing the tears. These are these penultimate moments where these guys know, and again, I was only fortunate enough to go to the Olympics and play in a bronze medal match, hit a crossbar, hit a post, and they go down the opposite wing and get a penalty. To know, like, in that moment when I was standing at the Olympics in Sydney, Australia with my hand on my crest, thinking like, oh my God, I made it. Like, I made it. Like, this is, like, I don't know if I'll ever get to a World Cup. At that point, it was 2000. I didn't know if I had that potential. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But in that moment, all I could think of is, all those times on the field when no one was looking, running my ass off, making sure I was doing all the right things, that I wasn't partying, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't hanging out with girls. Like, I was singularly focused on achieving this goal. That was that moment. And so when you're watching the World Cup next summer, think about that, because that's what all of these players, none of them are going to take for granted a single second, and understanding that they're going to leave it all on the field because they're representing not only their nation, but they're representing their families and everybody that helped them through the way.
Well said, man. Great perspective.
Appreciate
Always a pleasure. Okay, Brian Dunn, Seth. We're going to catch a break.
I would.
Trey's got him. He's going to send it. Actually, I need you to take a picture of Trey and I as well, because I've got a picture of Trey and I from 2005 that I'm going to fire up. So we're live today with a very special announcement. The global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and RSL. April 22nd, we'll catch a break. College football comes your way coming up next with Bill Riley. Keep it here on ESPN 700.
Taking their time, milking the clock, down to 10 on the timer, 59 on the game clock. Don McHenry, 5 on the timer, 4 on the timer. Don with a step back, 3 up, and good! Bullseye McHenry!
The final home game of the season for Utah football. It's hard to believe, even as I say it out loud. Kansas State in town for a 2 o'clock tilt on Saturday. Our pregame coverage will begin at 10 o'clock with Porter Larson, Trevor Riley, and then Porter will send it over to our next guest, the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, Thursday afternoon. When I say final home game for Utah football, Riles, what comes through your mind?
It's wild, Spence. It just feels like the other day we were getting ready for the season to talk about UCLA and things like that. I can't believe we're in game 11 already and the final game of the home season. It's just, I always say, football season's the season we talk about and wait all year round for, and it flies. It just goes by so fast. I mean, it just goes by in a blink of an eye.
It goes by in a blink of an eye, and that's why I always say let's not be totally miserable all the time, college football fans, because this is supposed to be fun. And, Bill, the past 3 games certainly have been fun, averaging 51 points per. Colorado, Cincinnati, Baylor. So we'll get to, the rankings. We'll get to a preview of K-State. But what stands out most about what appears to be a team that certainly had a little bit of a wake-up call after that loss in Provo and now just dog-walking 3 teams since then?
Well, they're clicking for sure, Spence. They're also not beating themselves. In the BYU game, the turnovers, the mental mistakes, the going for it and not converting, the penalties, all of that stuff, it led to a loss on the road against a good football team. They haven't done that in the last 3 games. They've absolutely played, I'm not going to say flawless football, but offensive football has been fantastic. Defense, with the exception of giving up quite a few yards against Baylor. But again, if a team is going to throw it 60 times and throw the deep fade 25 of the 60 times, you're going to give up a few plays here and there. But I think they're just really dialed in. They're better. Let's face it. Colorado's not good. Cincinnati was a little bit of a paper tiger when they came in here. And Baylor's okay. They're not great. And so Utah did what you're supposed to. When you're better than those teams, they went out and they beat the brakes off them. So I think they're in a good spot. And frankly, they're better than Kansas State, who's a really beat-up, injured, underachieving football team right now. They have some talent. And Kansas, that game who knows what that game's going to be the day after Thanksgiving. So it's set up pretty well for Utah to roll through the rest of this season and see where it goes.
Ultimately, if I would have told anybody at the start of the season that you got to sign on the dotted line right now, but if you do, you get 10-2, I'm not sure how many people around the program would have said no to that, Bill,
That's exactly right, Spence. That was kind of my sweet spot for this team. I thought this is probably going to be a 10-2. I think if they really play well, I never say undefeated. I just think undefeated seasons are unrealistic to predict. But I said, the absolute best ceiling could be an 11-1 season. I thought the low end was 9-3, but I thought 10-2 was a real possibility. And here we sit, 10-2. Problem is, the 2 losses, you never know where those are going to come. They're coming against 2 teams that are ahead of you in the standings. So ultimately, it could be a 10-2 season, and a 10-2 season that doesn't pay off with a really meaningful postseason game like a conference championship game or even a playoff game.
Yeah, unfortunately, and we'll get there in a moment, certainly a lot has to fall Utah's way. And, we had Yogi Roth on yesterday. We were talking about the 2023 Pac-12 season where a lot had to and a lot did. And some things that were completely unforeseen actually did go down. But let's get into a couple, of the specific dynamics. And there's an old saying that if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. Well, maybe we just need to adjust it when we say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you might just have 2. And it's not a bad thing. Ultimately, the lack of contingency plan as far as not being in place over the past couple of years, should Cameron Rising go down with injury the way he did really hurt this football team. And I think Jason Beck deserves a lot of credit for kind of balancing this situation. Devin and Bird appear to really like each other. Doesn't appear to be a lot of animosity there. And if Devin is as banged up as Witt has alluded to, having two kind of in your back pocket doesn't feel like a bad thing to me, yeah?
No, I agree with you. This is the best way to have two quarterbacks. You don't have two quarterbacks because you can't really decide between the two. If Devin Dampier is healthy and 100%, he's your unquestioned quarterback one. The problem has been Devin has gotten banged up in games. And I don't know that it's been banged up as much as it's kind of re-aggravated what I think is probably an ankle. Nobody says for sure, but it's a lower leg, which is causing him not to be – well, what you have in Bert Ficklin is a guy that he basically mirrors the skill set that Devin has. Maybe a little bit faster in the open field, but these two guys are mirror images. This isn't like you've got two quarterbacks and one is a drop back pocket passer and the other. Jason Beck doesn't have to change his offense at all. If Devin isn't 100% and has to come out for a couple of plays or sit a quarter, he puts Bird Ficklin in and the offense hums and he calls the exact same game. So, yeah, that's the old adage, and generally that's pretty true. But I think in Utah's case, because of the offense they run and the skill set of the two guys, I think it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it has for sure. You referenced K-State. The line last I checked was 17. I'll see if it moved. And Kansas State to start the year was one of maybe 4 or 5 teams that certain people picked to win the league. I mean, again, no Big 12 preseason media polls, so we're kind of left to rely on looking around at previews. And there wasn't really a consensus. I think Arizona State was receiving a lot of love since they won the league a year ago. Iowa State was in the mix at the time. Some ambiguity around Tech only because of the unknown, and certainly they have separated themselves from everybody else. But Kansas State has to be considered among, if not the most disappointing teams in the entire conference. And if I remember correctly, Avery Johnson had the best odds to be in the mix to win the Heisman of any Big 12 player, and that, of course, has not come to fruition. They're coming off a very underwhelming win because Oklahoma State is unserious this year. Their best win is probably TCU, 41-28. Opened the season with that loss to Iowa State out in Dublin. But again, the line is pretty massive, and as you and I have talked about every single week, because of the 2 losses Utah has on their schedule, they have to lay the hammer down. This cannot be a 20-17 win if you want to continue to impress the committee. But what does K-State do well? You referenced their injuries. Just give me kind of a mini preview for the final home game of the season coming up on Saturday.
Well, when they're healthy, Spence, they're a very good offensive football team because Avery Johnson is a true dual threat guy. He's about a 4-3 guy at quarterback. He can run it. He's got 5,000 career passing yards, 1,000 rushing. Their best running back went out early in the season. His name's Dylan Edwards. They were high school teammates, he and Avery Johnson. So they've got a backup, and he's not bad, but he's not Dylan Edwards. Utah's going to catch a break this week. Their best offensive playmaker at wide receiver, a kid named Jace Brown, he's now done for the season. So Avery Johnson's favorite target, who's probably very comparable to the Tyson kid, Jordan Tyson, who plays at Arizona State, he's not going to play this week. They've been beat up at some other positions as well. Avery Johnson is an X factor because of his speed, because of his ability to run and throw the ball. Utah's got to be able to tackle well with him. But they're not the same. And on the defensive side, they've had some injuries there too. Now, they're a pretty physical defense. They're, kind of that same mindset Whittingham brings Chris Kleiman, the head coach of K-State, likes as well. But they're dinged up on the defensive side of the football as well. To be fair, if you watch them play Texas Tech a few weeks ago, it was a lot like the Utah-Texas Tech game. It was in Manhattan. It was a one-score game going to the fourth quarter. And what happened? The Tech defense took over, a couple of turnovers, a couple of quick scores. Then all of a sudden, the game was out of reach. So their defense isn't bad. And if Utah doesn't protect the football, defense forces a couple of turnovers, I think it keeps Kansas State in it. If Utah plays clean against Kansas State, I think they're going to win the game and win the game pretty easily. But, again, never know. And that ball gets on the turf, a little momentum, you keep a team around, they might have a chance to be in it. But I just think that they're so beat up right now. And as you mentioned, the losses early on, they kind of took themselves out of the Big 12 race really before it began. It'll be interesting to see what kind of a mindset they come into this game on the road with this weekend.
So as we kind of teased a little bit earlier, the bottom line is for Utah, you do not control your own destiny. You need to win out. You need to win big. You need to lay the hammer down, and then you need things to go your way. So I wanted to get your thoughts on one of the things that certainly has to go Utah's way, and that is Brigham Young traveling to Cincinnati and Cincinnati needing to win that game. Now, I thought last week was BYU the best chance for Ute fans to see BYU lose the game because I thought that TCU matchup based off of the metrics would be tricky. And even Vegas told us it was a 3.5 point line. And BYU smoked them, and it was over pretty quickly. I just feel like this game, like when we were previewing Cincinnati and you joined us to preview that game, all of the metrics seemed to indicate it was a horrible matchup for the Bearcats when they played Utah. And we know that BYU wants to play the way that Utah wants to play. I know it's a 2.5 point line, Bill. I just don't view Cincinnati's defensive front as anything that would concern Brigham Young. Now, if you're a Ute fan, you have to hope Cincinnati gets it done. Do you think that they have it in them to beat BYU at home?
They have to play, and they haven't played this way. They got beat at home last week by Arizona. Now, Arizona's not bad. They've gotten better as the year's gone along. Problem with Cincinnati is last two games against Utah and against Arizona, they've become turnover prone, something they didn't do early in the year. Brendan Sorsby, who came in looking like a Heisman candidate to Salt Lake, has looked like anything but the last 2 weeks. And BYU's defense is better than Arizona's defense. And that's really what sets Cincinnati back is their inability to throw the ball consistently and keep a hold of the ball. So can Cincinnati do it? Yeah, they've got players. Forsby's good. They've got playmakers. Their defense isn't great, but maybe at home. But BYU finds ways to win. I mean, they've got the one setback at Texas Tech, and Cincinnati is not Texas Tech. We'll say that right now. So Cincinnati would have to play a pretty near perfect game, and BYU would have to do something they really haven't done except for once this year, and that's beat themselves and commit some turnovers.
Yeah, I think it's a tough ask. Yeah, and, the other thing that is out there, because you have to understand how many layers there are, since you and I last spoke, the tie-breaking scenarios have changed. And they've changed because, as you referenced, Cincinnati lost to Arizona. So that game, that win for Utah, is not valued the way it was last week, meaning that if in the chance that BYU loses to Cincinnati, now BYU loses to Cincinnati. Now Utah also needs Arizona State to get got one more time. They're playing Colorado coming up this weekend, and Colorado's not good this year, but they do get Arizona as far as the final game of the season. Maybe that could get tricky, but do you think there's a chance we also will get the miracle that we need from ASU, losing one of their final two games?
Well, maybe the final game, because that Territorial Cup is funny. Here's a scenario too, Spence. If BYU loses to Cincinnati, then Utah needs either Cincinnati to win out or Houston to win out. Mm-hmm. So if Cincinnati wins and then they win the next week against TCU, Utah would be in. Or if Cincinnati beats BYU and Houston beats TCU and then Baylor, Utah would be in as well. It's I know. It's not so far. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's on the outer edge of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, and the final potential scenario, and I was a little more confident about this last week than I am this week, and certainly the Oklahoma win in Tuscaloosa changes things, and the way the committee is viewing Notre Dame changes things. But if BYU wins out, which I think they're going to, if I'm honest, and if they go to the Big 12 championship game and they get their brakes blown off by Texas Tech again, it's like 40-10 or something, and Utah smokes K-State and smokes Kansas, do you think there's any chance the committee looks at Utah as a potential at-large, even though they lost the head-to-head to BYU?
I do think there's a chance that happens, Spence, because I do think they take into account how you're playing. And Utah would have won 5 in a row at an average margin, let's say, of 25 points a game. Their only losses would be to two teams that were in a championship game that were top 10 in the voting. I think there's a chance. Also, Oklahoma's not in the clear yet. Missouri's a good team. I think LSU's probably done. But this week's game against Missouri could be interesting. There could be some chaos on championship weekend. I would say if Utah doesn't make the Big 12 championship game, but they win out, there's a chance. You're 12 right now. If you get a little bit of chaos in front of you, you have to get to that 10 spot. You can't be 11 or 12 because of the other at-larges, the ACC and the Group of Five. So is there a chance? Yeah, I do. It may be a better chance than actually getting to the Big 12 championship game, to be fair, because that one you have to have a budget. But either way, it's not under their control. All they can do is go out and win and do what they've done the last 3 weeks and let the chips fall where they may.
I got to say, I really feel like the expanded field, the expanded 12-team college football field has paid tremendous dividends for the sport, because I think a lot of people were concerned about conference realignment, the Pac-12 going away, who, the old Charles Barkley, who he play for, which conference are they in type dynamic. But the expanded 12-team CFP bill has made the final portion of the season a lot more interesting for more teams than it used to, and I think it really leads to a lot of fun conversation.
I completely agree, Spence. When I was doing the show a couple years ago and they were talking about this, and people were like, oh, you're going to render all those games in November meaningless, all those right. No, you're not. You're going to make more games in November meaningful. Are you telling me Ohio State and Michigan is any less meaningful? Hell no, it's still Michigan, Ohio State. But guess what? Cincinnati, BYU, a game that nobody would have ever thought was meaningful on a national level, it's a meaningful game this weekend. Oklahoma, Missouri, old Big 8 rival. That's a huge game. It's just adding another layer of importance to games in November. So I'm with you. I think it's fantastic, and it's opening the door. Maybe there's only 4 or 5 teams, Spence, that can actually win it all, but that's no different than the games in March. Shoot, in March you've got to win 6 games. In this you've got to win 4 games. But what it does is it's also going to create more first-round matchups that are more difficult, too. And who's, by the way, against more and better football in December? Would you rather watch some more meaningless bowl games or add a layer of college football games that second, third week in December? Sign me up for that.
Yeah, well said. There's an interesting subplot to the potential of Saturday being Witt's final home game as the head coach of the Utes. I've kind of chuckled as I've gone through this exercise, picturing like Taylor Randall or Mark Harlan walking into his office and being like, hey, we'd like to do something for you on Saturday if it's your final home game, because I'm quite sure that would not be entertained. And look, none of us know, Bill. I just wanted to get the thoughts from the voice if this really is potentially it for Kyle. And I don't know. It feels like we should do something even though he doesn't want us to.
Well, I think there'll eventually be a statue outside of Rice-Eccles Stadium for him. I said that a couple of years ago when he became the winningest coach. I think I said after they beat Oregon that night, I said start making the statue now because he deserves it. I don't know, Spence. I think Kyle, starting really a couple of years back, has been taking this year by year, and I think he'll have a good feel for it probably in a few weeks. But I don't think he's at that place now because his team's in it right now, and they've still got technically everything to play for. So I don't think he's giving that a lot of thought, but I do think he'll probably give it some thought toward the end, if not at the end of the season.
Yeah. And, again, there's no winning here because I honestly, I felt like part of me was like, okay, let's get like a groundswell of something from the audience, something from the fans. And I just picture him being annoyed with anything that we would try to do for him.
Yeah, that's not really him. You know him. I know him really well.
Yeah.
He maybe at a game somewhere down the future after he's done it, they bring him back out, they unveil something, they put him in the Ring of Honor. But, he is not going to want any of that stuff in the moment, which is why he's not, some guys love the farewell tour. Some guys eat that stuff up. He would never in his wildest dreams announce before a season or in a season that this is his last go-round. He doesn't want any of that stuff. All he wants to do is coach some football.
Yeah, no, well said. All right, I do have a Texas Tech question, because this is and I'm not one to be, you listen to some Big 12 podcasts or you read some Big 12 bloggers, and they're just always in their feelings about how this conference is continuously disrespected. And by any metric, whether it's players sent to the NFL or head-to-head, like, you just have to be honest about where the best football in America is typically played. Are there exceptions? Yes, you and I were at the Sugar Bowl. Deanie's Seafood, shout out, okay? When we saw Utah beat Alabama back in the day. So those things do happen from time to time, but I'll just speak for myself. The majority of the time, year in and year out, the best football is played in the SEC and in the Big Ten. But from a Big 12 standpoint, it's a conference that I think for a while has been waiting to see if there's a program that can rise up and throw punches with the Ohio States or the whoever that you want to put, A&M this year, Indiana this year. If Texas Tech gets the opportunity to go up against one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the country, can they hang and maybe be that banner carrier for the Big 12 conference?
I think they're good enough to trade punches to a point, Spence, and I think their defense is certainly good enough to keep them into it. What's weird is, forever and a day, it's always been about offense at Texas Tech. Cliff Kingsbury, Patrick Mahomes, Mike Leach, all these guys. Their defense is one of the best in the country, and that's what's going to get them there. I'm not sure their offense is good enough against an Ohio State defense or a Texas A&M, somebody like that, because I don't think Baron Morton has been that good this year, and I think he's playing hurt. Don't get me wrong, they're the best team in the Big 12, and I think they're a playoff team, and I think they can win a couple of games. But the more I've watched them play as of late, I think they have an elite defense and an above-average offense. And I think to win the national championship against the Ohio States, the Indianas, the pick your Georgias, I think your offense has to be really good, and I just don't think Morton's been that guy this year. So I could see Tech getting to a Final Four, but I'm not sure they're a national championship team this year with that offense.
All right, before I set you loose, we had Alex Jensen on the show yesterday. It's always fun to visit with AJ and kind of talk about the progress. And as I continue to say, whether I'm interviewing him or breaking it down on the show solo, this is a brick-by-brick, one-step-at-a-time process, and it is from the ground up with only really one meaningful returning player, all due respect. But, they continue to stay clean. And I do believe winning is a habit, and I do believe it's good to just kind of make that part of your players' understanding of this is what we do here. The competition is the competition, and therefore Ken Pom has him at like 105th in the country. It will improve a little bit, but your takeaways through the first 5 games of the Alex Jensen era?
I think there have been some really bright spots. Terrence Brown, how about this for a stat, Spence? I got this stat during my broadcast the other night from media relations guru John Vu. Terrence Brown, TB, kid from Minneapolis, transfer from Fairleigh Dickinson, through his first 5 Big 12 games, has the 3rd most points in the history of the league. He's got 118 points through 5 games. Only Trey Young and Michael Beasley have scored more in their first 5 games. That's pretty good company right there.
Yeah.
So anyway, he's been really good. He is a terrific offensive player. He and Don McHenry, Keanu Dawes has been he's going to be a double-double machine, great rebounder. The other guys, there's some nice pieces there. And I'm sure Alex talked to you about this. They've just got to get better defensively. They have to. They have lapses. He said that with us the other night on the post-game show. They're a pretty good offensive basketball team, and they've got 2 guys that are really good combo guards in McHenry and Brown, but they've got to get better defensively. And I think that takes some time. You're bringing in 12 guys who have played at other programs for maybe 3, 4 years. And maybe these guys weren't asked to guard at the level at which Alex and his staff want them to guard. So you're kind of having to reprogram them and change their mindset on one end of the floor. So I think that's been a little bit slower coming along. But I think the offensive part of it's fine. They're a fun team to watch. They get up and down the floor. They can score it pretty well. But as you said, they haven't played a lot of good competition yet. Tonight they play Cal Poly. They're a team that's going to run up and down and shoot a bunch of threes. Not great out of the Big West, but it begins next week. You've got Grand Canyon, you've got Iowa, you've got Ole Miss in the MTE. Then you've got Cal out of the ACC. You've got Washington and Mississippi State before conference play begins. So, yeah, they've not really been tested a ton up to this point in time, but it will start kind of beginning next week and into December.
I'd be willing to trade you Tyrod Taylor for Patrick Mahomes because I know you're concerned about your Chiefs.
Well, I am concerned. There's very little. They're not going to win the West now, but that's okay. I mean, again, we're in such a day and age where everything's scrutinized, but the Patriots went 10 years between Super Bowls. They didn't win the division every year, though they won it most years. There are more. The weird part is, Spence, they're a more talented team on paper by far, but there's something amiss somewhere, whether it's Mahomes, the line, whatever it is. They're not making the same play, so I am concerned. I will reject the Tyrod Taylor trade for now. You can propose it again later, and we'll see about it then.
Fair enough, buddy. Have a good call tonight. Thanks for the time, okay? Be good.
Thanks, Spence.
Voice of the Utes, Bill Riley. Utah basketball tonight against Cal Poly. We're live today at America First Field out here in Sandy. It's I believe it's raining in Salt Lake, but it's not too bad out here. It's about 52 degrees, a little cloudy. Global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and RSL at America First Field on April 22nd, 2026. You can join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. Lionel Messi in Salt Lake, man. What a time to be alive. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. More college football with Kyle Bonagura coming up on the other side of a Thursday edition of The Drive right here on ESPN 700. Live today at America First Field in Sandy, where the announcement came down earlier that global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and RSL at America First Field on April 22nd, 2026. You can join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. An exciting day. Our next guest covers college football, but he also dabbles in the world of soccer. Kyle Bonagura, can you help us kind of put some context and help me and the listeners understand with a frame of reference just how big of a global superstar one Lionel Messi actually is?
So I think if you were to have the conversation, who is the most famous human being alive right now, like, he's in the conversation. I don't know how to, like, break that down. I'd have to go really just crunch the numbers on that. But like, that's the type of person he is. It's not just as an athlete. It's not just as a soccer player. He's a person who's recognized on every continent, every country. And for him to be, for him to go heads up with Diego Luna, I'm laughing because I was thinking about the unlikelihood of Diego Luna versus Lionel Messi being this, like, a way to market a game, which it absolutely is valid. But here's a kid who was, like, cut from the San Jose Earthquakes Academy, like, not that long ago, and the progression he's had in his career is also a pretty cool story.
Yeah, it's fair to say that, these two things are not the same as much as we love Diego, no doubt. But, really cool thing for our local soccer club to have Lionel Messi roll into town coming up next week. At the age of 38, what sort of – look, we see him, really dominate the landscape of MLS, but it is Major League Soccer. What sort of Leo Messi do we have these days at the advanced age of 38?
Yeah, when I watch him, it doesn't look like you're watching a very different player than you did 10 years ago. He picks and chooses his spots, of course. But, look, a couple of years ago, he led Argentina to a World Cup, right? Not two. Like, they won the World Cup because of him. And that wasn't that long ago. I was there in Qatar for that World Cup. It's only a couple of years ago. So, the fact that he was performing at that level, at age 35, now he's still very much a fixture with the Argentinian national team, is going to be, back in the United States this summer for another World Cup, leading one of the favorites in the world. He's still very much worth the price of admission.
When it comes to the growth of the game here domestically, and the interesting thing about the timing of Messi's appearance here in Sandy is it's on the precipice of the start of the World Cup, because there's going to be a worry, as there is a worry with every team in MLS that has the opportunity to have Messi in their soccer-specific building, is, does he make the trip? Does he pull a hammy? Does he So because it's really on the precipice of the World Cup beginning, I think the hope is he will be fit and informed to be prepared for that. What sort of growth can realistically be expected, in your opinion, Kyle, when it comes to the game of soccer in America after a World Cup is hosted in our region?
That's the $10 billion question that I think U.S. soccer has been trying to figure out how to answer, right? Because I think it certainly. I was a kid in '94 when the World Cup came here, and it exploded at that point, relative to where it was, right? There wasn't even a domestic league then. Now you have MLS's current form, and say what you want about where it kind of stacks up globally. It's still a really respected league with a lot of players who represent their countries at a high level. There's a lot of cool stadiums with great atmospheres and all of those things. That doesn't happen without the World Cup in '94. And so if you use that kind of as a guide of hey, this is what the World Cup helped lead to last time around, I don't think you can kind of allow for the possibility of the same sort of exponential growth. But I do think it's fair to say that there should be a significant step forward. I think MLS is making it's taken some interesting steps here, and announcing the schedule change where they'll align the MLS calendar with the global calendar, which I think is a good move in terms of just adding another layer of credibility to the league nationally. And I think I think soccer has really grown in the United States, and that will continue to happen at its own pace. But I think it's actually bigger for MLS than it is for soccer in general. If that makes sense in a weird way, because I think you just have so many people who are who are fans of foreign powers, right? EPL or La Liga, wherever it might be. And I think that, when people get a taste of what it's like to go to a soccer game in person, it's a fun time out, right? And so if the World Cup can be that introductory point for a lot of people, maybe they'll be more willing to go give MLS a chance and experience what it's like to go see a game in person. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. It's obviously the World Cup's my favorite sporting event, that exists, and what it does kind of for bringing the world together is really cool and a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, and I agree. It's interesting. I was not raised on the sport. I played it as a kid, but we all did, and I was on Team Yellow and whatever it is, and orange slices at halftime with juice boxes. But I was more or less kind of anti-soccer until we brought RSL here in 2004. And honestly, Kyle, even after that, it took me a while to really get it. But one of the things that made me get it is watching a World Cup where, this powerful moment before the game, and I cannot recall which country I was watching, but, they play the national anthems prior to the start of the match, and all of the players were, like, screaming the national anthem at the top of their lungs, and tears were pouring down their cheeks. I mean, when it comes to the passion, and this is one thing we run into with some of our domestic sports where the money is so big, like how much do these players really love playing the game? How much do they love the sport? I mean, the NBA employs employees that don't even show up for work half the time. What is it about the World Cup that seems to inspire the powerful connection and passion that even the biggest players in the world seem to feel?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because it doesn't, when it comes to pro sports, it's important, and you have a lot of people who care and all those things, but it is a grind. It's a job. There's no breaks really, like in terms of like it's every year, right? The cadence of the World Cup makes it really unique in that because it is once every 4 years, like the opportunity to play in a World Cup is so rare. Like some teams, three games and you're out, right? And then you got to wait another 4 years. You look at a country like Italy, which has been a global power historically. I mean, they've missed a couple World Cups in recent years. The U.S. missed the World Cup prior to this last one, right? And so the opportunity to play on that stage, like you just never know if you're going to be there again if you're a player. And then I think it's cool because when you are representing your country, like it is unique. It's very much like the Olympics, right? Where like everyone is behind you. There's no competing rivalry. I mean, I guess there's Mexico and maybe some other countries for people who have moved here or have ties. But for the most part, everyone that you know and everyone they know is behind for a similar cause, right? Everyone rooting for the same country. And I think that there's just something special about that. And I think, especially here in the U.S., like going back to, like, again, when I was a kid, like the national team was the only game in town, right? It was the only team to really root for because there wasn't a pro league or accessible, professional soccer to watch on TV. So like that was the team that a lot of people. I'm 41 just for reference points. So that kind of like people in my generation where you were exposed to it and had a chance to root for a team. So the national team became everyone's team, like it would be your favorite pro team. So all of those unique dynamics make it really unique and really special for a lot of people.
One more soccer question before we move on. Beating Uruguay 5-1 is not nothing, right? I mean, Uruguay is, I think when I checked, they were the 16th ranked team in the world. This comes off a 2-1 win over Paraguay, and they beat Australia before that. They're 4-1 in their last 5. We'll see, what the final selection looks like, but they beat Uruguay with a lot of the big dogs on the sideline. How, just where are you at right now with this process under Mauricio Pochettino, and do you feel like the squad is in a good place?
Yeah, like the results speak, and for a long time, the results told a different story, both before Poch was hired and after he was hired. Right, his first year was rough. There wasn't much continuity within the squad. It was tough to really have a great sense of what he was trying to build, but. Look, you have it was very clearly like, I guess it probably seemed like a B team when the lineup was announced, but you go out and beat an Uruguay team it was basically a first choice lineup for them, which is important context too. Bielsa said after the game, I saw a translation of it at least, that it was like, a country like Uruguay has no business losing with his first team, like losing to a bunch of second stringers for the United States. Like, that's unacceptable, something like that. He's like, and he's kind of right? Like that's a game that the U.S. shouldn't have been able to really, even win, let alone dominate 5-1. So yeah, it's as impressive a friendly performance as I can remember. But there's also there's another prong of that. It's like, okay, what does that mean for the World Cup? Well, like a lot of those guys, if you're drawing up a starting 11, like probably aren't like on the field, and so how much does it matter? Like, or does this change the conversation about who should be on the field? Like some of the guys who aren't there, Pulisic is the obvious one. That goes without saying that he slots in. But now you're looking at the midfield or the back line, and you're kind of questioning, okay, who from that game the other night, really deserves to keep playing as a result of what we saw. So, good problems to have, I suppose, as he tries to kind of narrow down what that starting 11 should look like.
Yes, sir. All right, let's do a little college football for the time that we have left here, Kyle. And since you and I last spoke, it was another week where the University of Utah really smoked, I guess I'll say, an average football team. Baylor's been hard to figure out. There's this group of Big 12 teams that, I don't know, I would put like maybe 4 to 9 that are like sometimes good and sometimes not. And Baylor's kind of in that conversation. And it got a little dicey for a moment after halftime when they pulled within one score, but then it just looked the way it's looked for Utah football for 3 weeks now, and 3 wins over, Colorado's not good. I think Cincinnati was probably a little bit overvalued at the time. We'll get to Cincinnati and BYU in a moment. And then just smoking Baylor 55-28. Now, it didn't change a whole lot because they need a lot of help in front of them. And they got a little with Texas losing, but they come in one spot up in the CFP rankings. They're going to need a ton of help moving forward, but the advanced metrics continue to like them, and the committee still seems to believe this is a really good football team despite 2 losses. Give me your thoughts on where we stand here. 2 games left for the Utah Utes.
Yeah, so they took care of business, which they had to do. But I think really the more important result over the weekend for Utah and its playoff hopes was Oklahoma beating Alabama. Yeah. Because, had Oklahoma lost to Alabama, they would have, effectively, for argument's sake, been eliminated from the conversation at 7-3. Like, there wouldn't have been much reason to kind of group them in a threat to being ranked ahead of Utah, assuming Utah wins out. But now that Oklahoma beat Alabama, they are 8-2. They've got Eastern Illinois and Auburn ahead of them on the schedule. Look, they're probably going to win both those games, right? So now it looks like they'll finish 10-2, and it's really hard for a team, if everyone kind of takes care of business, to jump another team, right? So if Utah's 8-2 now, they're behind 8-2 Oklahoma. They both went out. There's just not a precedent for Utah being able to jump Oklahoma in that scenario, right? And so that for me that's a problem, because if you kind of game it out and see where Utah could fall, like there's other issues too, right? There's the BYU conundrum, right? If you have an 11-2 BYU who you lost to and you finish behind in the standings, it's hard to justify that they could jump BYU very logically. It's tough to use logic and put Utah ahead of BYU when you have the head-to-head to look at. So they're in a tough spot. It still could happen, but I'm less optimistic now that there'll be enough things that can happen for Utah that will allow them to get to the field.
Yeah, there are 3 or 4 scenarios where they could qualify. A couple of them involve backing their way into Arlington with a loss by BYU to Cincinnati. They need Arizona State to lose. There's a funky scenario where Houston and Cincinnati win out. I mean, you're relying on a lot of help. But there does appear to be one backdoor scenario, and we've talked to you every week about the college football playoff simulator that you guys have on ESPN.com, where if BYU wins out, which I think they're going to, and Utah takes care of Kansas State and Kansas and just stomps them the way they have Baylor, Cincinnati, Colorado, even Arizona State, West Virginia, and then BYU loses to Tech in the Big 12 championship game and they get it handed to them the way they did down in Lubbock, there's a backdoor scenario where Utah could get in as an at-large as Tech gets in as the automatic qualifier, as the conference champ. Do you think that's a chance as well? That seems to be the most likely scenario because it's actually the cleanest when it comes to only really needing 1 or 2 things to go your way.
Right. Yeah. I mean that's definitely one of the possibilities, and that's kind of why I was pointing at the Oklahoma-Alabama deal, because it just takes one of those slots away, and like it really just makes it. I don't have them in front of me right now, but I know that they're like right near the cut. Like it would be right near the cut line. So even if they were to finish ahead of BYU, like if the committee ranks them ahead of BYU in that scenario, there's still a world where they don't end up in the field because of the 5 conference champions being ahead of them and all of that. So. Yeah, that's probably what you got to hold on to. Yeah, I think I saw there was a number that ESPN did where it was like an 11% chance to get to the conference title game, which is there's not a lot to cling to there, but it's something. It's not nothing, right? And so, look, it's 11% to get there. Then call it, you're going against a really good team that you would then have to beat. Call it 35% there. Like, the numbers are not great. And so I think in the end you're just kind of kicking yourselves for losing the BYU game, because the picture looks a whole lot different had they not given up the fourth quarter lead in that one.
That's correct. That's why we covered it the way we did on the show. Like I have believed all year that Utah is a very good team. I still believe they're a very good team, but it's one thing to lose to your rival. It's another thing to lose to your rival when that loss potentially costs you to showcase your team on a national level, Kyle. And that, I think, when we do the kind of the emotional look back of Utah football 2025, it will be with the undercurrent of like, dude, I think this is a good football team, but losing to BYU that year wasn't just a loss to your rival. It potentially sacrificed your opportunity to show the country just how good you are, No,
that's exactly right. And I think if you had flipped the result, right, if you had flipped the result and Utah won that game, like Utah has been more impressive in its wins than BYU has been in its wins, right? And so it's not as simple as just flipping Utah and BYU in the rankings. Like I think there would be a case that Utah would be ranked a few spots higher if it was the team with one loss instead of BYU, just because they have impressed in a really noticeable way I think every win, right? I don't know if there was a close one in there off the top of my head. Like they've just looked the part most of the season, but it really comes down to like two fourth quarters. I mean, that the fourth quarter against Tech could have easily gone the other way if all of a sudden you just allow for that possibility, and then the BYU one was close until the end too. So it's really, you reverse two quarters this season. It's very easy to to set up a possibility where this exact team is undefeated right now, and you're not kind of worried about if you're going to get in or not. You're talking about like, what does that seeding look like? So the margins are thin, and that's the sport. That's why it's fun. And also, I'd like to see the field get to about 16, because I think that feels a little bit better than 12 for me.
Yeah, they've only played one close game, and it was BYU. They've either blown the brakes off teams, or they got by Tech in the fourth quarter. So one of the things, Kyle, that they need to have happen is Cincinnati to win coming up this weekend against Brigham Young. I just don't think it's a good matchup for Cincinnati. I know the line is, I think it's 2.5. BYU's a slight favorite on the road, but Cincinnati's defensive front is among, if not the worst graded group in the entire conference, and BYU wants to run the ball, and they've been able to do that against every team outside of Tech. If I ask just the potential for an upset coming up this weekend and Cincinnati's at home, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch a lot of Cincinnati until the game at Utah a couple weeks ago, and I watched enough of that to look. It's just not a very tough team. Like up front, they was so lopsided in the trenches, and like I think it's going to be similar this weekend against BYU, and with that dictating like how this game will go. Like 2.5 feels low for me. Like it feels like a comfortable win for BYU. BYU looked good last week, and I think we even talked about it with them too. Is like they're in this weird spot where they have to impress, right? Like it's not about just like winning games now for BYU. It's like doing so in impressive fashion, because they could be in that weird spot at 11-2 where they're vying for an at-large at the end of the year. So they have every incentive to keep the pedal to the floor as much as possible as well. It's not that simple, but I just don't think Cincinnati is like built to play a team like BYU, because Utah's not so dissimilar, and we saw how that worked out a couple weeks ago.
All right, Kyle, last thing before I set you loose. We had Ivan Mizell on yesterday, and Ivan obviously is a legend. He's been doing this for basically 40 years, and he's on the CFP committee. He was very careful about the way I did my best. I tried to dig in about exactly what are you guys looking at, because the head-to-head thing is very applicable here with the Utah BYU dynamic. It's also applicable with Miami and Notre Dame. He continued to just say overall body of work. But also, identified a bunch of different advanced metrics that the committee is leaning into. If I just asked you, as far as what you think they are leaning into the most important dynamics when they're trying to figure out who the 12 best teams in college football are, and of course there are auto bids, what stands out most to you?
I would have said before this week, like best wins or like kind of like the tiebreaker, but then they put Notre Dame ahead of Alabama, even though they're both 10-2, and Alabama's got like 4 like ranked teams that are still ranked that they've beaten, and I don't know, Notre Dame might have 1, and so like all of a sudden that logic went out the window. So I guess I have to divert to like how like that placing more priority on games at the end of the year, because maybe that's why Notre Dame wasn't punished for losing those 2 early on. But I don't know. It's like I do think it like body of work is probably like as boring as it is, like probably like the starting point, and then I think personal biases creep in at a certain point. Like I know like when I fill out my ballot, there's low stakes with ESPN.com power rankings, but like I don't know, there's probably things about that way I consume the sport that like makes me feel or believe a certain way, right? And so if things are close, because like that's the thing is if you're looking at 2 8-2 teams from different conferences and the wins are similar, there's no perfect solution here. The advanced metrics are great. Any sort of context you can use to help better inform yourself is helpful, but at the end of the day, I still do think it feels like it's just kind of a gut feeling on an individual basis. And then when you're talking about a selection committee, it's basically just a combination of all those people's opinions, and it's probably as simple as that, really.
Yep. All right, buddy. Appreciate the time. Enjoy the weekend and the games. We'll chat soon.
All right. See you, Spence.
Kyle Bonagura covers college football and soccer for ESPN. Global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and RSL at America First Field on April 22nd, 2026. You can join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. Don't miss the greatest soccer player of all time and reigning World Cup champion Leo Messi at America First Field in Sandy on April the 22nd. We're going to chat with Jason Christ coming up. Richard Smith is live on site. We have Pablo Mastroeni stopping by. We're a little fluid the rest of the way, and we have our friends to do a little sports court as well. Busy Thursday drive, and it's good to have you with us on ESPN 700. Global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and RSL in America First Field on April the 22nd, 2026. Join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. Speaking of global icons, our guest on a Thursday afternoon, the president of soccer ops for Real Salt Lake and the Utah Royals, Jason Chrysler. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Made me a little nervous when you called me a global icon. That's a bit much for me, but much appreciated anyways.
I was hoping to see you here, Jay. We're at the stadium. Did you just leave when you saw my car pull in?
Not at all. I was just asking your producer there which part of the stadium you were in because I didn't see you in the Interform Club for the press conference.
Well, fair enough. We're actually in the bar area behind the Interform Club. But look, this is a big deal, Jay. And, I've been trying to, and probably failing, quite frankly, put the proper context for our listeners that maybe aren't huge soccer people of who Leo Messi is on a global scale and how big a deal it is that he's going to be here coming up next year. So help me out. How big is this?
Well, I mean, geez, other sports, right? Michael Jordan in basketball, Tiger Woods in golf, Jack Nicklaus in golf. These are once-in-a-generation type players. I think this is an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for any sports fan out there to come and see what is the greatest of all-time soccer player in the history of the game in Salt Lake, in our stadium, at America First Field. So it's an amazing once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I hope that as many people can come out to enjoy that, take advantage of the chance.
Away from just the soccer portion of this, Sportico has a list, and I don't know what the data is as far as how they analyze it, but the most popular sports in the world. Here in our country, I think if you asked an American sports fan, they would say football, and American football is actually 10th based off the numbers. The number they have, soccer, the most popular sport in the world by far, with 3.5 billion people worldwide listing soccer as their favorite sport. So we had a guest earlier say if you just named, who is the most famous person in the world, not most famous athlete or politician or religious leader, who is the most famous person in the world? And, Jay, there's a chance that the answer to that is Leo Messi.
Yeah, very good chance, I would say. Probably between Lionel Messi and another soccer player named Cristiano Ronaldo. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, I would say, a lot of people out there would say Lionel Messi. So, again, I think that's a terrific, interesting tidbit and another reason why people should come out to see him.
What sort of, of course I watch RSL matches, and when it comes to postseason time, I'll try to tune into some playoff stuff here or there. And when it comes to Messi, you cannot escape the highlight portion of what he does on the pitch because his highlights actually make like Van Pelt in SportsCenter in a way that most soccer highlights don't. What sort of player is he still, Jay, at the age of 38?
I'll tell you what, Spence, I actually am amazed, honestly amazed. I don't know how to put words around it, to see what he's doing at this age right now in MLS. Like for the past 3 or 4 months, he's been absolutely unplayable, unstoppable. The guy's just scoring at will and creating goals for his team at will. And I think anytime you've got a player like that, and obviously there's some other good players in that team, but what a difference maker for them. I think they probably have to walk into every game and feel like they've got an amazing chance to win when they've got a guy that's going to make himself or score himself 2 to 3 goals a game.
So it's interesting that he's playing for Miami because a gentleman that you know very well, and you spent some time with Miami in addition to knowing David Beckham, and David Beckham holds a special place in RSL lore because he played for the Galaxy in 2009 when the team that you coached lifted MLS Cup after beating David Beckham and Landon Donovan. And it's interesting to consider what the Beckham, and Grant Wall wrote the book, may he rest in peace, The Beckham Experiment, and what David Beckham kind of brought to MLS as far as credibility, certainly celebrity, attention. When it comes to what I'll call ROI, return on investment, how do you think the league has benefited simply just with the presence of Lionel Messi and the fact that he is playing for David Beckham in Inter Miami?
I think the league has benefited in so many incredible ways. I mean, most of those ways are about revenue-generating sources, jersey sales, ticket sales, TV deals, sponsorship deals, everything that goes into that. But, on top of that, just the level of the game and the other players that have wanted to come here, whether that's to play in Miami or to play in other clubs, because a player like Lionel Messi has sort of paved a new pathway for that, which is similar to David Beckham, to be honest. David Beckham is the player that probably paved the pathway for all the players like Lionel Messi. The designated player rule was started with the addition of David Beckham into this league. So obviously both guys are unbelievable pioneers and unbelievable figures in our sport, and will go down in the history of our sport for many years to come. So kind of a cool thing that they are, behind Inter Miami together.
You throughout the course of your career played against and coached as well some of the biggest stars in international soccer. When Real Madrid came to our market, you had a chance to play in that game against, at the time, the world superstar club that was. You've coached throughout the course of your career some of the biggest and best stars in the world. So when you look at the rest of the list, so Lionel Messi, of course, that's the big announcement. But we got my guy Sonny from Tottenham. He's going to be in town with the LA Football Club in September. Tomas Muller will be here. Chucky Lozano and Marco Reus also will be here as well. Before we end with a question about your club, when I just read that list of names, what does it say to you about the way that this sport has grown here domestically?
Yeah, it obviously speaks volumes about the level of the player that MLS has been able to attract to play in its league. I think it is moving at light speed right now. Just the improvement of the talent on the field, it just keeps getting exponentially better year over year. And it's just an exciting time for our game. Couple that with the fact that we've got the World Cup in the summer next year. It's literally as I said, I think it's a once in a lifetime season, once in a lifetime opportunity to see players like Messi and Son, and I appreciate your nickname, calling him Sonny. That was kind of cute.
It's my guy.
But an opportunity for a lot of folks in the Salt Lake community and around Utah to see some once in a lifetime soccer being played in our stadium next year.
Do you feel the need to patronize me at least once every interview? Does that make you feel good, Jason? Just out of curiosity.
I feel that it's a pretty good back and forth banter, Spence. I feel that you get your shots in as well.
Okay, fair enough. Final thing, and I'll set you loose. Since you and I last spoke, we heard some of the roster decisions announced, and Pablo and Kurt get the extension. Of course, your promotion was announced in addition. Little birdie, very little birdie, cute little birdie, has informed me that you have been traveling domestically to potentially continue this roster construction. Just give us an update. How's it going, and when, if at all, are we going to hear maybe some announcements with some additions or kind of things like that?
Well, I think we've received some really good direction from new ownership this past week about sort of having some more resources. Resources not only just on the player side, but resources, as I alluded to in my press conference, to build out a department that will help us to make more informed and better decisions as we move forward. If we are going to, and the intent is to spend more money on our players going forward, if we're going to do that, we need to be making good decisions. We need to be able to represent that those decisions are backed with a lot of information. And so it's just a really exciting time right now as we head into this off season, and it's going to be an extremely busy one, I can tell you that for sure. But an exciting time to be a part of it all for sure.
All right, Jay, appreciate the time. Big day, exciting stuff. Be well, and we'll chat soon, okay?
Appreciate it. Thanks, Spence. Bye-bye.
Jason Christ, president of soccer ops for both Real Salt Lake and the Utah Royals. Global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and RSL at America First Field on April the 22nd, 2026. Join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. We'll catch a break. Smitty, our guy, we'll do a little hoops coming up. And then we've got Pablo Mastroeni, who, by the way, has Argentinian heritage. I'm quite sure he's very excited to watch this legend roll into town. We'll do a little sports court, then we're back to college football in the 5 o'clock hour of the drive on a Thursday. Keep it here on ESPN 700. Global icon Leo Messi in Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and RSL at America First Field on April 22nd, 2026. You can join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. An exciting day out here at America First Field. Not just because Leo Messi is going to roll into town in April, because Richard Smith is joining us live on site. Hello, Smitty. How are you?
Richard Smith is already rolled into town.
Yes, indeed.
Spence.
Yes.
A full, 6 months ahead of Lionel Messi. And, as should be the case, I would be the opening act. Mm-hmm. And then, it would be like opening for Frank Sinatra.
Okay. Yeah.
When they ask, how long do I stay on? And they say, you stay on until Frank shows up, and then you get off.
Is that how it used to go when Sinatra?
Well, there was there's one of the great videos that I've watched time and time again. On it used to be on Showtime. David Steinberg, the famous actor and then director, was doing this series for Showtime. Where he was interviewing comics just about the genre of comedy and how that works and how you get success in this field. And he talked to Brad Garrett, who was famous on the Ray Romano show. Everybody loves Raymond, right?
Of course.
As Ray's brother. And Brad Garrett tells this great story about how when he was breaking in early in his career, he had finished second in a Star Search talent. If you remember, the Ed McMahon used to host,
of course,
in the mid '80s, which was the beginning of this whole, search for talent stuff that now is on with America Loves Talent and all that kind of stuff. Well, he tells the story that his prize for coming in second was being assigned to open for Frank Sinatra in the Catskills. Now, this is when Sinatra was near the end of his career. Mm-hmm. And so he was just doing the Catskills for fun and giggles and would show up, and he was drinking a lot at the time and whatnot.
Frank was?
Yeah, and Brad Garrett tells this great story about how he said, now, how long do I go on for? And the guys Frank Sinatra's guys told him, you go on until Frank is ready to come on, and then you get off. And so is that 5 minutes? Is that 20 minutes? We don't know. But when Frank shows up and walks in the side door, we give you the signal, and whatever you're doing, you just get off. Okay? That's how it works. So one night he says he's on. He has like 25 minutes, does his 25 minutes, keeps looking to the side. No Frank. The guys are on the side doing the rolling sign, like keep going, right? He says, I got nothing. So I do a Q&A with the audience. Hey, how you doing? Where you from? Whatever. For like 15 minutes, I look to the side. Frank's still not there. And finally, he says, I just gave up because I got nothing else. He goes, so I just go. Anyway, everybody, stick around for Frank. And he walks off the stage. And so now there's an empty stage, and people are waiting and whatever. And so these guys come back to his dressing room, sit down. Hey, what was that out there with the stick around for Frank? He goes, what do you mean? He goes, I heard you say stick it to Frank. And he goes, no, I didn't say stick it to Frank. I said stick around for Frank. Like Frank's coming, so you should stay around. He goes, I heard you say stick it to Frank. Julie, what'd you hear? Yeah, I heard the same thing. And these two guys were like getting on him. The next morning, his agent calls him, hey, you're on the next plane out of there back to L.A.
Oh, wow.
They fired him on the spot.
Oh, jeez.
He said, but his experience, he said, was unbelievable because Frank Sinatra would just show up whenever he wanted to, in whatever state he was in that night. You couldn't count on it. Nobody in the audience cared because they were there to see Frank Sinatra, right?
Yeah.
Right? And, so it's so I might be in that place where maybe I just hang around until Messi shows up, and then they go, hey, you, let's go, get out.
Fair enough. Now, look, I know you're not a huge soccer guy, and I was not a soccer guy at all. In fact, kind of anti. Never really played it outside of when I was a kid. Didn't really have a frame of reference for how popular it was worldwide until we brought the club here in 2004, and then I started to learn about the game, and then I started to watch World Cups. We have an interesting dynamic in our state where the most watched basketball game in the history of the sport was played here. Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls, Utah Jazz, John and Carl. Of course, you were part of that front office. Do you feel like you kind of have a frame of reference for a guy like Lionel Messi and how big of a deal that is?
Oh, absolutely. He's Elvis right now, in the soccer world, and everybody knows that he and Ronaldo are the guys. And if they show up anywhere, soccer fans want to be part of that. This is a great thing I don't know how the MLS schedule works, but I know, it's generally speaking, you get rotation and turn, especially against the teams from the other conference that come through, and you don't play them every year. Mm-hmm. So this is just the summation of Inter Miami being assigned to play at Real Salt Lake in the regular season schedule next April, and it's a great get, for Real Salt Lake. Obviously, the place will be buzzing, and people will be very excited in the anticipation of being able to see, literally a world level icon, in your hometown playing against your team, is something that everybody gets excited about. Look, everybody gets excited when they see the NBA schedule and they know the Lakers are coming a lot of times 2 times a year, but sometimes only once a year to Salt Lake, and LeBron James is going to be coming whenever that is. I mentioned that happens to be this Sunday, mm-hmm. that the Lakers are going to be here, but fans get excited for that, and they look forward to it. And now with this, there'll be a lot of build up for Messi coming, and I was fortunate, Spence, you talk about being a soccer fan. Back in 2016, I got to see Real Madrid play in a Champions League semifinal against Juventus.
Oh, cool.
When Ronaldo was playing, and that was a big deal.
Was that in Madrid?
That was in Madrid.
Oh, that's really cool.
And we were, Linda and I were in the streets like 2 hours before, and the streets were packed, and they were chanting and dancing and the whole thing, and smoke bombs and all that kind of stuff before the match started. Mm-hmm. And we were fortunate to be able to see a great world-class level match like that, and the excitement that comes with it. And Messi brings that kind of excitement everywhere he plays.
Is there one more thing here, and then I have a lot I want to ask you about the Jazz, because I did the show this week with Dave talking Jazz, and so I have a bunch of numbers that I kind of went over, and I want to see if you think they mean anything. But I talked about this earlier. The first World Cup I watched, what struck me is I'm watching the pregame ceremony, and what they do is they play the national anthem of both teams, and then they show the players. They kind of do the slow motion camera thing where they're showing every player, and they're both lined up next to each other. And I don't remember which country it was, but one of the first matches I watched during the pregame, they're playing the country's national anthem, and as they're scanning the faces of the players, they're screaming at the top of their lungs the country's national anthem, and tears are pouring down their cheeks. And I just wonder if we have anything here that's that passionate, because we talk all the time about the NBA having employees that just don't want to show up for work. It was just like a really cool thing. I'm like, this doesn't just mean a lot to fans. This doesn't just mean a lot to the countries. This means everything to those guys.
Yeah, well, even in the sport of basketball, Spence, when you talk to international players and guys who have risen to the highest level now and come to play in the NBA from Greece, which is Giannis, and from Serbia, which is Jokic, and Slovenia, which is Doncic, and Dirk Nowitzki before them from Germany, and what have you. All these guys come to the NBA because this is the highest level you play at, right? Just like if you're a soccer player, if you're one of those guys, you end up going to England to play in the Premier League, right? That's the top level in your sport. Well, all these international players in the last 20 years that are coming to play in the NBA, they still have the passion for their country, to play for their country, more so than anything else. And you see, in whether it's Eurobasket, whether it's the Olympics, whether it's the World Cup of basketball, those guys play for their teams no matter what the scenario is, even if their team might not be very good. Doncic, for example, is carrying Slovenia. He was playing with Dragic, and they happened to win a Eurobasket 5-6 years ago. But otherwise, Larry Markkinen in Finland is on his own, but they still show up to play for their country. And I'll tell you what, overseas, Spence, it's interesting. The U.S. viewpoint on world competition is that the Olympics is the highest competition you can get in your sport in terms of looking at the world level competition. But for most of the world in the sport of basketball, the World Cup is the most important, because that's the one that everybody in their mind growing up looked at it in a similar level, if you will, as the World Cup of soccer. So World Cup of soccer is the prime competition you can play in, and players overseas around the world have always looked in basketball the same way. So even though they will play in the Olympics and they will play in the World Cup of basketball on alternating years, guys around the world, if you ask them, basketball players, they'll say, oh, in my mind, it's representing my country in the World Cup of basketball. That's why last year when they had that overseas, they everybody showed up, and the U.S. sent kind of like a second team, if you will, because why? Guys like LeBron James, Steph Curry, Anthony Davis, whoever, and not singling those guys, for that reason, but they look at it and they think the Olympics are the most important. But everybody else around the world thinks the World Cup is most important. That's why everybody showed up from around the world at the World Cup, and why those teams, whether it's Germany, Spain, Slovenia, Greece, they all showed up in force, ready to compete, because it's that important to them.
I think most fans would also tell you, like American fans, like, hey, what's the biggest international basketball tournament? I think most fans would say the Olympics as well. I think I probably would.
Yeah. And that's because, Spence, I think part of that, the rationale is that the players overseas, that's just been ingrained in them through their childhood. The phrase World Cup was always with soccer, and then it was only in recent years that basketball decided to rebrand that competition as the World Cup of basketball to be on the similar platform as the World Cup of soccer. It's interesting that I think those players look at that. In the U.S., guys like LeBron James, Anthony Davis, whatever, those guys didn't grow up looking at soccer in that light, so they never had that viewpoint of the World Cup. Therefore, they always saw the Olympics as that epitome.
It's really interesting. So let's move over to the Jazz now. Since you and I last spoke, I believe they're 2-2, a loss to the Pacers, lost to the Hawks, and then they beat the Bulls in double overtime. They hung 150 on Chicago, and then they're coming off a loss to the Lakers, LeBron James season debut. And, in preparation for the show that I do, Talking Jazz, I was looking at some of the numbers, and I'm just going to read some of these, and I want you to kind of help us understand whether or not there's something to learn here, because there are some things as a team they're doing really, really well. So they lead the NBA in assist percentage, and that is simply how many field goals are made based off of, how many field goals come off of assists as opposed to isolation. Like Oklahoma City's one of the last teams in the league because they have Shea. The Lakers are low because they have Luka. They also are rebounding at a high level. They're sixth in the NBA at offensive rebound percentage. They are, let's see, right now, they're down to 12th in defensive rebound percentage. They're seventh in overall rebound percentage. Those are the only two categories where they're kind of in the upper echelon. So they assist on a lot of made buckets, and they're crashing the glass pretty well. Everything else is more or less down low. But does that say anything to you, like things that they are doing well, they're rebounding well, and they're also assisting on a lot of made baskets?
Well, their offense has gotten better this year, I think, just from the sharing the ball perspective. I think Will Hardy has them moving the ball pretty well. I think they've it looks like they've ingrained in their younger players, especially Gante George, Isaiah Collier, who's just playing the last few games. When those guys come in, the kid from Florida, Clayton Jr., he's also used to moving the ball. Those guys are sharing the ball. That's where you get assists, when the ball moves from side to side, especially if you can do that twice in a possession. Now you're getting the defense to shift, and eventually, if you do it enough and quickly enough, guys are going to be out of position defensively where you can attack somewhere or get a nice open shot, especially on a weak side. But they're doing a better job at that. The problem with the Jazz in terms of seeing production, in terms of results, wins and losses, as they currently that currently sit at 5-9, is that they're still one of the worst defensive teams. Now, the last couple of years they were the worst defensive team. It's early in the year. They've only played 14 games, and they've crawled up to 25th. So they're not the worst, but they're in bottom 5 defensive team. So that's still their problem, is that until they figure out how to be a decent, you don't have to be a great, but just be a decent, run-of-the-mill, average defensive team, be able to stop some transition baskets from happening, be able to stop guys sometimes by keeping guys in front of you. They're going to be always climbing uphill because their offense is not going to be able to do enough to keep them, from consistently losing, because that defense has just been so porous. But they are doing better offensively, and they are making shots a little bit better than they have. So that is something to look at in terms of improvement.
So they're also 9th in pace, so they're playing fast, and Will's talked about wanting to do that. The other areas on offense where they struggle is they're 25th in turnover percentage, so they're still turning the ball over at a very high clip, and overall offensive rating, they're 22nd. So even though the rebounding's been better and the assist percentage has been better, they're still not near an elite offensive team. But moving over to, as you referenced defensively, when we pull up defensive rating on the advanced metrics, to your point, they're 25th. It is a slight improvement, but if you're 22nd in offense, if you're 25th in defense, you've got a long, long way to go. Are you seeing any improvement defensively just as far as effort? I mean, is there anything that's been better at all? And it's interesting with Walker Kessler sidelined, and I do want to talk to you about Walker in a moment, sidelined for the rest of the season. He's probably their best rim protector, yet they have been incrementally a little bit better defensively. Are you seeing anything that's improving?
Yeah, I think, a little bit. Nurkic has played a little bit better than I thought that he would coming into this situation. They just got Kyle Anderson back in the lineup, so it'll be interesting to see how he affects any of that kind of stuff as being a big guard out in front. He's never been a stellar defensive player, but he gives you some length and he gives you some scramble ability out in front that may help their defense. But they're still a sloppy team. As you mentioned, they turn the ball over too much. I think Keontae George, even though I still don't think he's a point guard, they're still trying to force feed that situation. He has gotten better. He's averaging 20 and 7. Okay, and he's averaging a little over 3 turnovers, basically a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio, which is about average. You'd rather have your main ball handlers, if they could get to a 3-to-1 ratio in assist-to-turnovers. That's usually the demarcation line of having a decent playmaker. So he's still learning in that regard. I'm still convinced myself that his real role in the NBA and value will be coming off the bench as a sixth-man scorer, shooter, combo type guard, and maybe that's where he'll end up. I don't know, but he's still young and he's learning and he's gotten a little bit better. He still has a penchant at times to force the action to try and get to the rim. When the defense has stymied him and he still gets a little belligerent. Trying to do that at times, but hey, he made a big shot the other night against Chicago, right? That's a big time shot against a tough defense by Chicago, and made the winning game shot, and he's willing to take it. That's the other part of that equation, Spence. As a young guy, if guys don't shy away from those moments and they're willing to go after them and try and have success, those can be growing moments for a young team going forward.
So Tim McMahon joined the show this week, and, Tim is a very well plugged-in, sourced NBA reporter. He broke the Luka Doncic trade. He broke the Nico Harrison firing story, and, obviously he's a Dallas-based reporter, but he is ESPN's reporter who covers the Jazz. When, you guys had Mitchell and Gobert and those really, really good teams, he was out here more, and he was actually covering the team a little bit more, and even though we don't see as much Jazz content from him because they're not very good at playing basketball, he is the guy that seems to have well-sourced, well-placed sources. And I want to be clear, I don't have any frame of reference for this at all. But we do know the story with Walker Kessler was, Walker's camp, the Jazz negotiating about a potential contract extension. It did not happen. Walker was asked about it during his preseason media availability, and he essentially said it, I'm paraphrasing, I'm really frustrated. I don't want to talk about it all year, but I'm really frustrated. Walker gets hurt, surgery, out for the year. And Tim essentially reported on my show that his understanding is there's a real gap between Walker's camp and the Jazz. Now, I've heard a couple things throughout, and Andy Larson from the Tribune joined us, that Walker's been frustrated about the lack of competition. I should say the lack of being able to win, and the Jazz's decision to be very calculated about losing intentionally for draft positioning, as we all know they've been doing. Unpack this for us. Like, again, I don't know how real this is. I don't know if it even matters, but it's a new piece of information that a lot of people in the market have been talking about. Yeah, it's interesting, Spence, because Walker Kessler is on his rookie contract, and the Jazz are trying to work to get an extension of that. They hold the rights, meaning the Jazz, to Walker as a player in terms of potentially being a restricted free agent next summer. So it looks like that's the road they're headed down. What that means for our listeners and the average Jazz fan is simply that no matter what happens in negotiations, Walker Kessler wants to be here. He's frustrated about what's going on. He decides he doesn't want to be here. Whatever that ends up being in terms of his approach going forward emotionally, the Jazz still hold all the cards in terms of getting him back in the fold and getting an extension with him as a restricted free agent. So the scenario that could possibly play out would be the one that we had several years ago with Gordon Hayward, where the Jazz offered him a rookie extension. His representation thought that that was too low. The Jazz thought that it was more than fair for where Gordon was at that point in his career. Had not made an all-star team yet, was still a developing player. The Jazz then said, go ahead and go on in the free agent market and see what you can get. They went to Charlotte. Charlotte gave him an offer. We found out later that the public did. That the Jazz had offered him, $10 million a year. Charlotte offered him $15 million a year. So now the Jazz have the opportunity to match that and to keep him, or to not match it and he just goes away. And the Jazz decided, well, we like him, we're developing him, he's going to get better, so we're going to match the offer. So in this negotiation between the team and the player wins. So you shake their hand, you go, good for you. You got that one, okay, but we still love you and we want you in the group. And so that's what happened for the next 3 years. Until Gordon Hayward exercised his option to leave in the fourth year of that deal, and as we all know, ended up going to the Celtics in the back half of his career. But that scenario could very well play out with Walker Kessler, where the Jazz say, hey, go find another offer from somebody, and in the meantime, we're still going to negotiate with you. We're still going to try and get a deal. But if your agent is going to go out and get another deal from somebody and they're going to offer you whatever it is, $5 million, $7 million, now in today's NBA, $10 million more a year than we're offering you, then we will still have the right at the end of the day to decide whether to match that or whether to let you go. And so in that regard, no matter how you're feeling about it, where your emotions are, you're upset, you're happy, you're in the middle, whatever it is, at the end of the day, it's a business. And in this scenario anyway, in this moment in time, the Jazz will have the final say on how they want to handle that situation regarding Walker Kessler. Yeah, the fact of the matter is, if Walker's frustrated that the early portion of his NBA career has been with a team that's unserious about competing, or if his feelings are hurt that they didn't come to an agreement, he's not going to have any say about how this plays out. And that's another point that you bring up, Spence, which is very important. He, in some of his comments, has related the feeling that I'm frustrated, and I think part of the frustration is not getting maybe a deal done to secure some long-term future stuff for himself personally, but also frustrated in how the Jazz were handling
things in terms of their business, especially last year, with not trying to win games, with purposely trying to lose for the lottery stuff. And that kind of stuff, Spence, tends to come back onto players in terms of how they learn to be successful at the highest level, meaning the NBA, because that's something that you have to learn. That is something that you have to grow into. That is something that has to be part of your day-to-day DNA. And if you're working, in this case, for an organization at that moment in time that was not trying to win, that all signs said they were trying to position themselves in the worst possible case for the lottery. We all know how that worked out. That rolls over in the locker room. Players talk about that stuff. They talk about it on the team plane. They talk about it in the hotel on the road. Like, what are we doing? What's the deal here? Are we playing for an organization that's serious about trying to compete and do the best we can, or are we just trying to, shuck and jive and dance around and do some other things that isn't really relevant to what I'm trying to do as an individual to pursue my career and get better at what I do and have more success at what I do.
Smitty, you are a prince of a man for joining us on site for only one segment. So thank you, my friend. It's good to see you. Okay,
I appreciate you having me. I love being down here with RSL. These guys are terrific, and I know with the Miller family and Steve Starks. And those guys, they've got this thing going in the right direction. It's exciting to see all the stuff that they have going on.
All right, there you go. The great Richard Smith. We're going to catch a break and bring in Pablo Mastroeni coming up on the other side. But before we do, who out there likes money? Raise your hand. You didn't, you're lying, okay? We all do. Let's get your money working for you, okay? The bottom line is if you're with one of the big national banks or even some of the local banks, ultimately they're in business to profit off of you and your money. The great thing about a credit union is they are a not-for-profit operation. And right now, America First Credit Union has all these great deals to entice you to join them when it comes to learning about how you can make your money work for you. Let's get your money making money, okay? It's the official credit union of the U of U Athletics and, of course, Real Salt Lake, the Utah Jazz as well. You can support your team with the official Utah Athletics Visa debit card, which is free with America First checking options. You get early access to the venues, whether it's America First Field, Rice-Eccles Stadium, or the Delta Center. And right now they've got a new member offer where they're just going to hook you up with $100 if you make the change and open up a checking and a savings account. And here's the other thing that's really cool. It's never too early to teach your children how money works. They're offering you a $50 deposit in a checking or savings account that you open up for your teen. So go to americafirst.com. Let's see, americafirst.com/deals. So americafirst.com/deals is where you can find the information. But the other thing you can do is stop by any of the 87 America First Credit Union branches in our state. We'll catch a break. Pablo joins us coming up next on ESPN 700. Global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and RSL at America First Field on April 22nd, 2026. You can join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. I would imagine our next guest has some good insight on this entire situation. The head coach of Real Salt Lake, Pablo Mastroeni, on a Thursday afternoon. Pops, happy Thursday, man. How you doing?
Happy Thursday, Spence. Doing well, man. Doing real well. Thanks.
Well, this is a really cool thing. And, we have talked to you before about, your heritage. You have Argentinian heritage, obviously. And so help us understand the magnitude of an event like this where not just a soccer player, but potentially one of the most famous people in the entire world in Leo Messi is going to be here next April.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty awesome. And I think since his arrival to MLS, the landscape has changed drastically. And obviously with another player like Mueller coming into Vancouver, some big name guys, right when they're at their best in their careers are coming over. And obviously having Messi around is awesome. I think every player wants to have the opportunity to play against a player like him. Miami's in a great run of form, and so they're playing against a really good Miami team as well. So, it's just a really exciting time to be a soccer fan, especially to be a soccer fan in Utah with Miami coming into town next year.
You were born in Argentina, were you not?
Yep. Born in Argentina, moved to the States when I was 4.
Okay, so you were a pup when you came over here. But when it comes to who Lionel Messi is in that country, can you kind of help us understand what that looks like?
It's so hard to put into words, Spence. Again, the most highly revered figure in all of Argentina. There wouldn't be a person that wouldn't know who he is and who he plays for and all these things. He is a deity. He's a god. And obviously Argentina is so into soccer and historically have been a powerhouse. And then you have, Diego Maradona, who was in the 80s, and now you have Lionel Messi, who's taken over the 2000s and has been, one of the best players in the world for the last couple decades, I'd say. So anyways, he's a god in Argentina. And I think that's why, when we played Miami last in Miami, there was, Pablo Ruiz and his wife and kid in to make sure they had an opportunity to take a picture and see him because he's that important to the culture, to everything Argentina stands for.
Have you been inundated with ticket requests? Are we going to see the Mastroeni family? I would imagine it could be pretty exciting and important for folks that are related to you. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. I talked to my uncle quite a bit in Argentina, and we have some great conversations about soccer. And I think when he gets this news, he's going to lose his mind and maybe want to fly out for this game. Because, and again, it's really hard to get close to someone like Messi. And in some of those stadiums, abroad, security so tight, you can see him from a distance. But I think, America First Field has great seats everywhere. The proximity to one of the most important players of all time is right there. So, I can imagine my parents and my brother, and everyone's going to want to come out and take a peek at Messi at AFF.
What sort of player is he at the age of 38? When you put on your coaching lens and you watch tape and you'll prepare to scout to play against him, who exactly is he at this stage of his career?
The interesting thing is he's evolved to a player that you'd have to always, that impacted the game for many more moments when he was younger. And by that, he was just getting on the ball a lot. And now what he does a great job of is allowing the play to build on one side of the field. He waits patiently in the pocket. And then when he gets the ball, it's go time. And it's kind of like a fast break, even though it's not a break. It's literally, defenses are set up, but he gets the ball, and everyone just knows it's go time. And I'd say that's how he's kind of evolved his game into making it very difficult, because there could be 15 minutes where he doesn't even touch the ball, 10 minutes where he doesn't touch the ball, and you think, oh, we got this guy kind of sorted out. and then in 1 second he makes a play that leads to a goal, whether he scores or sets up his teammate. And so, it's almost more difficult now than it was back then, just because back then he was always buzzing about. Now it's like he's really patient, and he does a good job of mixing up his game. He's not every time he gets the ball he's going to dribble people. Sometimes he plays it off 1 touch, 2 touch. So he's really used his experience to evolve into the player that he is today, where he's still the most prolific goal scorer in our league at 36, 37. But every time he steps on the field, that there's a killer waiting, to unleash his goods, and he's still capable of doing that at his age.
We have this interesting current cycle with the game of soccer and how things are kind of changing here domestically. And, I can remember the conversation back in the 90s when the World Cup was here about what it could essentially mean for the sport of soccer in America. And essentially it created the league, Major League Soccer, and it's still here, a number of years later. Here's what I wanted to ask you, though, because you played in a World Cup, and Messi will be here in April, which is just a handful of weeks away from the start of this World Cup that will be, hosted in our region. And as you and I have talked about before, I did not grow up a soccer fan. I played when I was a kid, like most of us did, and then went on to play other sports, and really didn't watch it much and didn't really have a frame of reference for what a World Cup was, really, quite frankly. And then in 2006, and that's a World Cup you played in, I was like, all right, I'm going to see what this is all about and, watch some matches and check out why people love this so much. And I'll never forget this moment when I'm watching the first match, and they do this thing where they play the national anthem for both teams, and then the camera is scanning the faces of all the players. And I'm watching professional athletes scream their country's national anthem at the top of their lungs and cry real tears. Watch them, the tears pouring down their cheeks. And I was struck. I'm like, there's something different about this. What makes the World Cup the World Cup, Pablo?
That's a great question, Spence. I think, it's every child's dream that grows up playing soccer is to represent their country in a World Cup. And I think that's the best way to encapsulate it. A lot of kids dream of being astronauts and all these different things. I think if you're a soccer player and you're serious about it, the pinnacle of sport is representing your country against all the other countries in the world. And I think that national anthem embodies all the struggles that you went through in your country to get to the top of the game and be alongside 10 other guys that experience the same type of hardships. And now you guys are tasked with representing the greatest country in the world on the biggest stage of the world. And I think that's where the tears come from. There were so many times and so many moments in my life where, my grandfather passed away and right before the 2006 World Cup, and I didn't know that he'd passed away. And for whatever reason, I had this emotional buildup, and I started crying during the national anthem because it was just so powerful. And then afterwards, I found out he passed away literally right before the game. And it was one of those. It's just one of these magical things that when they play your national anthem and you're up against another country, you bring all your friends, you bring all your families, you bring all your ex-teammates, your club soccer coaches. You bring everyone with you, and you are the representation of all your experiences in the past. And I think that's why that moment is so powerful, and that's why you see a lot of guys crying, because it's almost a moment of disbelief that you actually got to this stage.
All right, buddy, before I say you loose, with all the conversation about Leo Messi and all the conversation about the World Cup, there's a team that you coach, too, that I'm sure you're focused on. And since you and I last spoke, we have seen some of the roster decisions that have been made by the front office. And congratulations, by the way, on your contract extension. And Kurt now reporting to Jason. So what are you hoping to have at your disposal? What sort of tools do you want in that tool belt when it comes to this offseason and potential additions to make sure that when we hit the ground running, you are ready with a roster that can compete at the highest level?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the biggest takeaway from last year was how young we were and our inability to close off games. So we lost quite a few points from positions of being ahead in the game state. And so I think those two things is, we want to a little bit more experience on the field, because I think, again, if you're going to be a developing club, you need to have guys on the field that can can show the younger players in real time what it looks like to be a top pro. So I think that's one thing we identified, and we started that process with Victor and Juan Cruz. And so I think that will be important, not only just to help those younger guys, but also to manage games the right way and have a little bit more experience. I've been here a million times. I know how to see this game through with a 2-0 lead or a 1-0 lead, regardless if it's the 20th minute or there's 15 minutes left in the game, right? And so that's a big part of it. And the other part, obviously, is our scoring output. You know, we got to bring in somebody that can not only create goals for his teammates, but score goals himself. And that was a big that was a glaring aspect of our attack that we just didn't get right last year. And so we're working hard with Jason and Kurt to make sure that we bring in another player that can help with Diego Luna, that can help with Victor, and that can help with Cruz to make sure that we're a very good attacking team in that final third.
All right, buddy, thank you for the time. It's an exciting day. We'll set you loose. Have a great weekend, okay?
Awesome, Spence. Appreciate it, bud.
Okay, Pablo Mastroeni. It's a big day. We're live today on location at America First Field, where global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and RSL at America First Field on April the 22nd, 2026. You can join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. So some exciting stuff there. We will get back to college football coming up in the 5 o'clock hour of the show. We'll bring in the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley. We'll get you ready for the final home game of the season for the Utes. But before we catch a break, I want to tell you about my friends at Game Day Men's Health. Now, I'm really excited to have them on the show because I've actually worked with them for a long, long time now, and they have helped me achieve incredible results. So I'm indebted to them, and I want you guys to achieve the same. So holiday season, basically here, Thanksgiving next week. And, you know, you got a few months until the weather's going to warm up, and don't be the dad who goes to the pool with his T-shirt on. Okay, let's get you back in shape. And as you age, ultimately it's just harder to get in shape and stay in shape. And so a couple of years ago, I had this goal. I'm like, I want to get into the best shape I've been in as an adult. I am now in my mid-40s. I'll leave that there. And as you age, it's simply harder to get in shape, all right? And so after about 3 months, after I set this goal, I had been working out really hard. I had been eating very cleanly. I'd cleaned up a bunch of habits, and I was really frustrated with the lack of production. So I was talking to a friend. I'm like, dude, I've been doing this for 3 months, and this is difficult. And he said, have you ever tried to supplement testosterone? I'm like, no, I haven't done that. He said, well, check out Game Day Men's Health. They can help you out. So here's what I did, and they'll do this for you, and you'll get the same deal I received to make it more affordable. You go in for a free consultation on the house. So what does that mean? They take a little bit of blood, and then they go over your levels with you, and they review where you're at and talk about their products that can help you improve certain levels. Okay, for me, that was supplementing testosterone and also utilizing their peptides. If you need to lose a lot of weight, if you're kind of in that pre-diabetic phase, they've got semaglutide, they've got tirzepatide, they've got all that as well. I haven't used it, but they have that to offer if you want to go in that direction. So they go over your blood work, offer some things here, and ultimately within 3 months after my meeting them and utilizing testosterone and peptides, I made the progress like double time compared to the prior 3 months where I was trying to do it without the products of Game Day Men's Health. And it's been about 1.5 years, and I've maintained the shape as a result of meeting with them every couple months, going over kind of the levels, because they cater it to where you're at. Like, they keep track of the progress as well. So you get the free consultation, which is big, but here's the kicker. If you mention you heard me talking about it on the show, they give you 50% off your first-year membership. That's half off. That's what I get. That's the deal I get. So these are products once upon a time that were saved for rich people, celebrities, elite athletes. But now you can take advantage of this offer, and I can promise you, if you give yourself a couple of months of hard work, clean eating, and utilize the process put in place by Game Day Men's Health, you will get in the best shape you've been in as an adult. That is a guarantee. All right, we'll catch a break. A little sports score coming up on the other side of a Thursday drive on ESPN 700. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday, right about now, with our friends from Handy and Handy, Garrett and Preston. I apologize about the delay. How we doing, gentlemen?
Hey, Spence. How you doing?
Hi, Spence.
No problem.
All good here. All good here. Appreciate the time. So let's jump right into it. Kennard Davis Jr. pleads not guilty to misdemeanor DUI charge. Of course, Kennard plays for Kevin Young and BYU. This has been widely covered in the market. What's going on? What's the latest?
Yeah, Spence, thanks for saying his name. I wasn't sure if it was Kennard or Kennard, but yeah, this is not new news, but it is legal, so we're jumping in on Sports Court. We know that last week sometime, Kennard Davis, a guard for BYU, starting guard, I think while driving to the airport, was involved in a car accident, a crash. The police came and they suspected that he was driving under the influence. They also saw that there was report of evidence of marijuana in his car, so he was ultimately arrested for suspicion of driving under the influence and possession. That was the earlier report. Then it was the report stated that he was given standard field sobriety test, drug recognition evaluation, blood urine test, and that it all noted that drugs were involved. So that's the law enforcement side of things. Now we know that Tuesday, Kennard showed up in court with his attorney, and I just read that his attorney's name is Danny Fraser. Some white matter in my brain. I think he was a football player for BYU. Maybe Porter can confirm that for us, but I kind of think he was. But he's represented by Danny Fraser, showed up in court and pleaded not guilty. We know that the prosecution actually recommended a type of a fine, so it looks like there's already probably talks of a plea. Kennard's attorney put in a request for a jury trial. That's just procedural stuff that when you file your response of pleading, it includes if you want a jury, and whether this makes it to a jury is probably highly, highly unlikely. But we also know that BYU has an honor code, and frankly, any team would probably have a type of honor code if the player was arrested and for a DUI. But there's also the honor code of BYU. But we know now that he's been suspended. It came out that BYU and Kevin Young basically said, "I really don't have a statement right now." He said, "I'm going to let this thing take its regular course and see what happens." One thing I haven't heard, and maybe Garrett has read it or heard it, I don't really know what happened in the accident. Was someone it said that Kennard was banged up a little bit? Was someone else injured? If someone else was injured and Kennard was found to be the at-fault party, there could potentially be a civil case as well. I don't know if we'll ever hear about that. That may not hit the papers, but we know about the case involving Jake Retzloff, kind of the same type of stuff, different facts, of course. But there was a civil case, and we looked into the criminal stuff, and nothing was filed. But that's all we know for now, Spence.
Go ahead, Garrett. What do you got?
Just my understanding on that question, Preston, that it was a pretty minor accident. That was my take, anyway.
Okay, we'll move on now. Salt Lake City mother is suing the University of Utah and says she was racially targeted and kicked out of a basketball game. Go ahead, guys.
Just another Utah BYU game providing some legal fodder for Sports Court, but this arises out of a BYU Utah basketball game last January at the Huntsman Center, January 18th, and a family was there. The mom, the dad, and they had their, I think it was reported as preteen kids sitting in front of them with a couple of signs. One sign, something about BYU went to the Diddy party, and another sign, something shut the F up. Anyway, a couple of security guards come down the aisle, take the signs. The allegation is rip them up. The kids are upset. There's some back and forth between the mother of these kids and the security officials, and the university's position on this is that these signs violate the code of conduct for fans in the stadium. That these signs are inappropriate. They're sexual in nature and offensive, and so they're not allowed. So this back and forth goes on, and anyway, she, as you mentioned, Spence, did claim that she's been targeted because of her race. She's Latina. That's what's been reported. And so now we see a lawsuit, and the lawsuit involves a couple of things. One, it's a little bit procedural, but they had done what's called a grammar request. Of course, the university is a public institution, state-run, and so those documents, would be available through a public records request. And so they'd done that and weren't pleased or felt that the university had really complied with that request and provided everything that they had. Apparently, there is body cam footage. We haven't seen that yet. And so it involves this grammar request and then also just claiming that our civil rights are violated. So at this point, it's really just a complaint that's been filed, and we'll see what comes of it.
All right, Preston, you're up, buddy.
Yeah, interesting case. I know when it first hit, Garrett and I kind of go, wow, what lawyer would really take this? Not that it wasn't potentially, but to go down the court process for this type of thing. But Garrett pointed out that it's a civil rights case, and that takes it to another level. And it is a very high-powered, reputable firm that is taking this case. And my other question is, who's Diddy?
Well, probably nothing we need to dig into on the show today. Once known as Puff Daddy, potentially. Maybe that will ring a bell.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Teaching Preston about hip-hop and popular culture on the program today. All right, a little bit of a throwback. The latest on the wrongful death lawsuits. The family of deceased pitcher Tyler Skaggs has filed against the Angels. What's going on here?
Yeah, we've talked about this, and the backdrop of it is Tyler Skaggs, a pitcher for the Angels, had been provided some painkillers, a number of painkillers, and some of them were fentanyl-laced painkillers given to him by the Angels communication director. As part of that, the communication director was actually charged, prosecuted, and is serving a federal prison sentence. Well, on the heels of this, the Skaggs family, they looked into it, and they filed a wrongful death lawsuit alleging that the Angels knew or should have known that this communication director was providing the pills. And now whenever someone is in their employment, now whether this is actually the course and scope of his employment, it's a question whether it involves him getting any type of treatment from this guy, but they're saying they should have known about it, and this guy was your employee, so hey, you're on the hook for it. So they filed a wrongful death lawsuit. And as part of their wrongful death lawsuit, one of the big damages is loss of life. And they put on testimony about their relationship with family members and go into all that type of stuff. And loss of life is a big part of a wrongful death lawsuit. But one of the other big portions, and especially in a case like this, are economic damages. And you have to prove these damages. And one of the allegations is, hey, Tyler Skaggs was a good pitcher, and he was going to have a pretty decent continued MLB career. So what they did is they brought in an expert who was a former involved with the Major League Baseball Players Association, who's familiar with players, and he was deemed an expert in this. And what he did was he came in and said, hey, Tyler was going to have a career where we estimate, and you bring an economist in probably too to put the numbers together, but estimate that he was going to make somewhere between $109 and $120 million. So that was their claim, and so then the defense comes in and they try to really go after this expert, and one of the things they say is, hey, wait a minute, the guy that you're kind of comparing him to is this Tajuan Walker. Well, Tajuan Walker was a lot better pitcher than Tyler Skaggs, and they point to the contracts that he had, a $20 million and a $72 million contract, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to whittle down these damages and say you're not really using a good comp here. Tyler Skaggs probably wouldn't earn all of that, and also Tyler Skaggs is really injury prone. How do we know that he was going to play this time and really continue out his career? So what they're trying to do is for the jury, and incidentally, it's in its 6-week of trial. That's a long trial. This is not just what's going on before trial. This is a 6-week trial. What they're trying to say to the jury is, hey, these numbers are really just speculative right now, and so in the end, they have to win the case first and foremost. They have to prove that their allegations that the Angels knew or should have known this resulted in the death of Tyler Skaggs, him taking the pills, and ultimately resulted in his death. And then the jury will get a chance to award damages if they buy into these damages as well as the wrongful death damages, which we call general damages, which is not a set figure. I suspect this thing's going to wrap up pretty soon. 6 weeks is a long trial.
All right, Garrett, over to you, bud.
Well, I think it's interesting because we've talked about this sort of an issue a lot of times on Sports Court, where an athlete's an athlete's career is cut short because of an injury, and the need to prove damages these future earnings. And so it's interesting to see it play out, and it really takes a lot of times for it to get reported anyway, for the case to really get to trial, as Preston's mentioned, and have an expert take the stand and talk about what those earnings would be. So, interesting to see this play out.
All right, moving over to what's becoming a common theme on the show, athletes in trouble when it comes to sports betting and also being involved with the mafia. Side note, the official stance of this program is do not bet on sports, do not find yourself getting involved with the mafia. But what's the latest with this story?
Yeah, exactly. We support that as well here at Handy and Handy Spence. This is the Lucchese crime family, really behind this one. The way the headlines first came out on this is it was, 14 people charged and then college athletes, but it's among these 14 people, there were a couple of college athletes, two of which looks like I think some wrestlers from, I want to say Rutgers. Anyway, this is a New Jersey. A lot of this comes out of New Jersey. This crime family, and so it's the same. But it's the same thing we've been seeing over and over, right? But what's a little bit interesting about this is their own sports books, right? How sports betting used to happen with a bookie, not with, a DraftKings app on your phone. So a little bit different than some of these other cases. Not looking good. I think the focus is going to come down from administrators and leagues on this, and we're going to probably see a crackdown even more.
Okay, Preston, over to you, bud.
Yeah, we talked about this. Garrett nailed it. I was jumping ahead. Let's get into the next story.
All right, moving on to the next and final story of the day today, which is the city of Pasadena's attempt to legally compel UCLA to play home football games at the Rose Bowl for the next 2 decades. What's the latest?
Yeah, we talked about this when it first hit a few weeks ago. Now where we're at is the background is that the Rose Bowl and the city of Pasadena, they have a contract with UCLA. They've always had a contract with UCLA, but one that runs up through 2044 to play games at the Rose Bowl. And this is a legal contract. Well, apparently Pasadena and the Rose Bowl caught word, a little bird, that UCLA was actually looking to jump ship and move their games to SoFi Stadium. So the city of Pasadena Rose Bowl, they ran to court before anything was really formalized that, hey, they're leaving. They ran to court, and they asked the court to issue what's called a temporary restraining order that would prevent UCLA from negotiating any type of a move. Well, the judge looked at this, and, on the heels of that, UCLA, they kind of poo-pooed it and said, hey, what's the big deal? There's nothing going on. We haven't made any decisions. But they opposed the motion, and the judge basically, he agreed with UCLA up to now. Basically, the showing is you have to show imminent harm and irreparable harm, and the judge kind of said at this point you really can't show that because UCLA hasn't left. They haven't entered into any contracts with anyone, and the attorney for the city of Pasadena, he came out with some pretty strong statements in this, that he said, they unequivocally said that they intend to leave the Rose Bowl, and that they said something like, we want this to be kind of a quiet thing when we leave. And he says, hey, they've misled us. We have looked at this, and we make millions of dollars in revenue, the city of Pasadena, every year, and up through 2024. In addition to that, we've made $187 million in improvements to keep the stadium going. And without UCLA here, we lose a lot of revenue. Well, the judge did say, I'm not going to grant your temporary restraining order, but if you want to jump into discovery, meaning depositions, interrogatories, requests for production of documents, that type of thing, and look into what negotiations have taken place between UCLA and SoFi at this point. If you find out anything, you can run back to court and ask for a preliminary injunction, which would essentially enjoin UCLA from pursuing that. So this is kind of interesting. If they do get into this, they're going to be subpoenaing certain things from SoFi and from UCLA. There'll be emails, there'll be texts, there'll be documents, that type of thing. And I don't know how clean UCLA, how really nothing this is. But if they find out things and show that UCLA is kind of headed down the road of trying to do this, we talked about that UCLA has a rough time getting students out to that stadium, especially if they're having a rough year. So if they find out anything, then potentially preliminary injunction would be in place.
Garrett, the final word is yours if you have anything to add to that very thorough breakdown.
It was thorough. We'll rest with that.
Okay, there you go. So for any of our listeners who have legal questions, before I set you loose, how can they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Well, we'd love to talk to anybody out there with your legal questions that you have, especially in the area of personal injury. That's what we do, help people who've been in accidents. You can call us at 801-264-6677 or go to our website, handylawutah.com.
Okay, gentlemen, thanks for the time. Again, sorry for the delay. Have a great weekend, and, of course, go Utes.
Thanks, Spence. Go Utes.
Go Utes.
Garrett and Preston Handy, get a hold of them if you have any legal questions. Really good people. All right, live today, and have been all day, at America First Field. Global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and RSL at America First Field on April 22nd, 2026. You can join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. We'll catch a break, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. College football to take you home before we send it over to Utah basketball, so keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, here we go. Drive at 5 time, Thursday afternoon style. It's about 7 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. A chilly, cold, rainy Thursday afternoon today. Happy Thursday to you, and as it is every single day, it is great to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, Porter Larson producing the show today back in our downtown Broadway media studios. Looks like we have a good forecast coming up this weekend with some sunny conditions, temperatures around 50 degrees, and this time of year, that's not too bad at all. We have been live today with our good friends at Real Salt Lake at America First Field. If you're hopping in your car to get that commute started on a Thursday afternoon, you may have missed the news, but global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna and Real Salt Lake at America First Field on April 22nd, 2026, just a handful of weeks away from the start of the World Cup. You can join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. So we've had a good time out here. We've been able to catch up with a lot of the RSL folk and encourage you to go check out that wait list because it's going to be quite an event coming up in April. Now, your Week 12 of the pro football slate starts tonight with the Bills and the Texans at NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas. The Buffalo Bills are a 5.5-point favorite. Texans without C.J. Stroud. They're going to start Davis Mills once again. We're going to send you to Utah basketball tonight. The Utes take on Cal Poly. The Alex Jensen era has begun with 5 wins. Cal Poly tonight, and then it's going to be Grand Canyon coming up 5 days from now. So the non-conference slate for Alex Jensen and the Utah Utes continues on tonight at 7 o'clock at the Huntsman Center. We had Alex Jensen on the show yesterday. If you missed that conversation, check out the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. We have some information about why Brian Schottenheimer elected to sit CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens for the first series of Monday night's game against the Raiders. CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens missed curfew as they were out at the Red Rock Casino having dinner and drinks. And obviously Schottenheimer decided to sit them, and ultimately, when they played, they dominated and had a really, really good game. So that's some news that barely just surfaced. From the world of college football, some news just came down, and I guess this felt inevitable, but now it is official, as Mack Rhoades is now out at Baylor. Mack Rhoades, the Baylor athletic director that took a leave of absence. He was also the chairman of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Well, he is now neither. He has been at Baylor since 2016. Ironically enough, credited with cleaning up the program after the Art Briles mess that was left behind. But he is now out. There have been a lot of rumors about exactly what is going on, and I'll leave that to other people to talk about. But Mack Rhoades has left, encouraged to find more constructive things to do with his time, and he is out as the Baylor athletic director. We are high speed ahead to a massive weekend in the world of college football. Only 2 more chances for teams to impress the committee. 2 more chances for Utah, 2 more chances for BYU. It is a massive game for Brigham Young as they still have the potential of making it to Arlington and qualifying for the college football playoff as the Big 12 champ. The line opened up at 3.5, but it has settled at 2.5. Not a lot of movement. BYU is a 2.5-point favorite, traveling back east to play Cincinnati. So that line has stayed steady for about 4 or 5 days. And the Utah line has not moved at all. My advice to my listeners is always this: do not bet on sports. But when it's a 17.5-point line, that's a pretty scary number. Now, Kansas State is going to be without Dylan Edwards, their best running back. They have been without him for a number of weeks. But Jace Brown, their best wide receiver, is not playing either. So Utah, 17.5-point favorite to win the game coming up. And that game, by the way, is a 2 o'clock kick at Rice-Eccles Stadium here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Our pregame coverage will begin at 10 o'clock with Porter Larson and Trevor Riley. And then we'll, of course, throw it over to Bill Riley, the voice of the Utes, Scott Mitchell, and Stevenson Sylvester for the call. Final home game for the University of Utah this year. If you've not been up to our ESPN VIP tailgate, please come by and say hello. Would love to meet you. And then, obviously, head on into the stadium and say goodbye to the seniors. It is senior day at Rice-Eccles Stadium. So we'll say goodbye to a group of very, very talented players. And not just seniors. We have some underclassmen that are most likely going to declare for the draft. ESPN's latest mock draft, by the way, The NFL mock draft that was released today has Spencer Fano going at 10 and Caleb Lomu going at 20. I think there was some conversation potentially about Caleb coming back, but if he has a first-round grade, unfortunately he is probably gone, and Utah will be forced to ultimately rebuild that offensive line that has been not just the best offensive line in the Big 12 this year, but one of the best offensive lines in the entire country. So Spencer Fano, Caleb Lomu, some others probably taken off, so it's a chance to say goodbye to the seniors. Is it a chance to say goodbye to Kyle Whittingham? No one knows. Devin Dampier was asked earlier today by our very own Sean O'Connell during the Dishing with Devin segment that Sean does every single week. We'll let you hear that, by the way. Prior to Utah basketball tonight, we're going to let you hear the conversation that Sean had with Devin today to preview the Kansas State game, and then ultimately trying to figure out whether or not this is Coach Witt's final game, at least final home game at Rice-Eccles Stadium. Of course, Utah with one more game after the home finale. That will be a post-Thanksgiving matchup with Kansas. So some big games this weekend, unfortunately, is the SEC's annual right of flipping all of us off with two middle fingers where they do not play anybody. So it's a glorified bye week for some of the biggest and best SEC teams. But we do have a glorified playoff game at Autzen this weekend, and it is of interest to our local fans. You need Southern Cal to beat Oregon. It does open up the door for USC, though. So USC-Oregon at Autzen Stadium is probably, well, not even probably, the biggest matchup of the college football weekend. College game day will be at Autzen up there in Eugene for USC-Oregon. The Fox Big Noon crew will be in Cincinnati at Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati, Ohio, where BYU-Cincinnati will do battle. Still a few scenarios in play for Utah football to qualify for the Big 12 championship or qualify for the CFP. You need Arizona State to lose, and they played Colorado this weekend, so that's probably not going to happen. You need BYU to lose, as we've talked about all week and we'll continue to talk about tomorrow. I just don't see that happening. BYU, not a good matchup for Cincinnati, just like Utah was not a good matchup for Cincinnati. So even though the line is 2.5, again, my advice is do not bet on it, but that feels like a very small line for a BYU team that made a big-time statement last week in smoking TCU. So there you go. The Jazz are off tonight, but they're going to welcome in the best team in the West. Oklahoma City rolls into the Delta Center tomorrow to take on the Jazz. They're coming off a loss to the Lakers. It was the season debut of LeBron James. BYU basketball will be back in action tomorrow at 2 o'clock, actually, against Wisconsin. That's a top 25 matchup. And the Utah Mammoth are in action tonight, taking on the Vegas Golden Knights. So you do have some hockey on your television if you're looking to watch something other than Thursday Night Football or Utah basketball as the Utes welcome in Cal Poly. Always feel bad interrupting a track like that. Check the rhyme. Tribe Called Quest. Maybe my favorite Tribe song of all time. All right, wrapping it up on a Thursday. Global icon Leo Messi and Inter Miami arrive in Utah to take on Diego Luna at RSL at America First Field on April 22nd, 2026. Join the priority wait list now at rsl.com for tickets. We're going to send you over to some Utah basketball tonight. Of course, we'll do a little dishing with Devin, Sean O'Connell's conversation with the quarterback of the Utah Utes. Your weekend in pro football gets going tonight with some Thursday night football. It's the Bills and the Texans. In Houston, that game is on Amazon Prime. And don't forget, Utah-Cal Poly. We have a very short show tomorrow as the Utah women are taking on Syracuse at 3 o'clock Mountain Time. So we will be drinking through a fire hose. Porter Larson, what do we have coming up on a very truncated Friday edition of the show?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we'll only be on air for 40, 45 minutes or so. It'll be you and I and our friend Roxy Bernstein stopping by. You can talk some college football, of course, some college basketball, and Roxy's also in town for a little hockey on this week. So
there you go. So you do get some hockey tonight. The Mammoth welcome in the Vegas Golden Knights. Jazz back in action tomorrow against OKC. And then a massive Saturday of college football featuring Utah, Kansas State. Saturday at 2 o'clock. Our pregame coverage will begin at 10 o'clock with Porter Larson and Bill Riley. We will say goodnight. A very special thank you to all of our friends out here at America First Field, Trey Fitzgerald and his staff. To Brian Dunseth, the Bill Riley, Kyle Bonagura, Richard Smith, Pablo Mastroeni, and Jason Christ. Holy smokes, that's a lot of interviews we did. If you miss any of them, ESPN700sports.com is where you go. You can check out our mobile app. The ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. And then finally, for what we do in our space, including 7 interviews today during the afternoon drive, 4-hour program, check out the podcast page, which is called The Drive with Spence Checketts, and that's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, give us all the stars. For Tanner, my on-side tech, of course, Porter, the producer of the show, my name is Spence Checketts saying good night. Enjoy your Thursday evening. Enjoy some Utah basketball. We'll talk to you on a truncated Friday show right here on ESPN 700.